In the rugged Montana Territory of 1876, Charlie Morgan's reputation as the fastest, most reliable mail carrier on the frontier was well earned. For 3 years, Charlie had navigated treacherous mountain passes, outrun bandits, and delivered mail through Apache territory without missing a single delivery. The U.S. Postal Service paid top dollar for Charlie's services, and not a soul along the 200-mile route suspected that beneath the dusty clothes, wide-brimmed hat, and deliberately deepened voice was Charlotte Charlie Morgan, a 26-year-old woman with more courage than most men twice her size. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The summer heat beat down mercilessly as Charlie guided her sturdy Mustang along the narrow path that wound through Rattlesnake Canyon. This route shaved nearly half a day off her journey, but few riders dared to take it. Apache scouts were known to watch from the high rocks, and the Blackwell gang had ambushed 3 mail carriers in the last month alone. "Easy, Scout," Charlie murmured to her horse as loose rocks clattered down the canyon wall to their right. Her hand moved instinctively to the Winchester rifle secured to her saddle. 3 years of delivering mail had taught her that hesitation meant death out here. The sound came again. Not rocks this time, but a low groan. Human. Charlie drew her rifle and dismounted in one fluid motion. "Who's there?" she called, her voice deliberately gruff. "I'm armed, and I ain't in a charitable mood." Another groan, weaker this time, came from behind a cluster of boulders. Charlie approached cautiously, rifle raised, ready to fire at the first sign of a trap. What she found instead was a man sprawled on the ground, his shirt soaked with blood, a U.S. Marshal's badge pinned to his vest. "Don't shoot," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Name's James Hollister, U.S. Marshal." Charlie lowered her rifle but kept it ready. "What happened to you, Marshal?" "Blackwell gang," he managed, wincing as he tried to sit up. "Ambushed me 3 days ago. Been crawling, trying to reach the settlement." Charlie assessed his wounds with a practiced eye. The bullet had torn through his side, missing vital organs but causing significant blood loss. Without treatment, he'd be dead by nightfall. "You got lucky," she said, keeping her voice low and gruff. "Bullet went clean through." Hollister's eyes, glazed with pain and dehydration, focused on her face. "You're the mail carrier, Morgan, right? They say you know this territory better than anyone." Charlie nodded, already pulling medical supplies from her saddlebag. 3 years alone in the wilderness had taught her rudimentary field medicine. "Hold still," she ordered, cutting away the blood-soaked fabric around his wound. As she worked to clean and bandage the injury, Hollister studied her with increasing curiosity. "Your hands," he said finally. "They're too small for a man your size." Charlie froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. In 3 years, no one had ever noticed, or if they had, they hadn't lived to speak of it. She'd been careful, deliberate, in crafting her disguise and reputation. The loose clothes, the deepened voice, the tough demeanor, all designed to keep her secret. "You're delirious from the fever," she replied gruffly, pressing down harder than necessary on his wound. Hollister hissed in pain but didn't back down. "No, I don't think so. You're a—" Charlie pressed the barrel of her Colt revolver against his temple. "Finish that sentence, and badge or no badge, I'll leave you for the vultures." For a long moment they stared at each other, neither willing to yield. Then, unexpectedly, Hollister laughed, a weak, painful sound that turned into a cough. "Your secret's safe with me," he wheezed, "but I have to ask, why?" Charlie holstered her gun and resumed bandaging his wound. "Women don't get to be mail carriers," she said simply, "and I needed the work." "Must be lonely," Hollister observed. Charlie tied off the bandage with a sharp tug. "Better lonely than dead or worse. Now, we need to move. The Blackwell gang patrols this area, And if they find a wounded marshal and the mail carrier who helped him, we'll both be vulture food by morning." She helped Hollister to his feet, supporting his weight as he swayed unsteadily. "I can't leave you here, and I can't delay my delivery. That means you're coming with me." "Where?" he asked, grimacing as she helped him toward her horse. "Copper Creek," she replied, securing him to the saddle before mounting behind him. "It's not on my usual route, but there's a doctor there who doesn't ask questions." As they set off, Hollister leaned back against her, barely conscious. "Why are you helping me? I could turn you in." Charlie urged Scout forward, keeping to the shadows of the canyon wall. "Because unlike most men I've met, Marshal, you were honest about what you saw, and I respect that even if it might get me hanged." What neither of them knew was that from the ridge above, a pair of eyes watched their departure. Jed Blackwell lowered his spyglass and smiled. He'd been hunting Marshal Hollister for days, and now the mail carrier had saved him the trouble of tracking him down. 2 birds with 1 stone, and the mail pouch would be a nice bonus. "Boys," he called to the men waiting behind him, "looks like we're headed to Copper Creek." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Night fell quickly in the canyon, but Charlie pushed on, knowing that stopping meant certain death if the Blackwell gang was indeed on their trail. Marshal Hollister drifted in and out of consciousness, occasionally mumbling about a woman named Sarah and something about stolen gold. "Stay with me, Marshal," Charlie urged, feeling his body temperature rising despite the cool night air. The fever was setting in, which meant infection wasn't far behind. "You don't understand," Hollister suddenly said, his voice surprisingly clear. "Blackwell isn't just after me, he's after what I know." "And what's that?" Charlie asked, more to keep him talking and conscious than out of real curiosity. "The gold shipment," he replied. "Army payroll being moved from Fort Benton to Fort Laramie next week, worth more than $50,000. Charlie's breath caught. That was more money than she'd see in 10 lifetimes. "Blackwell has a man inside," Hollister continued, his words becoming slurred again. "Planning to hit the shipment at Devil's Crossing. I was on my way to warn them when they ambushed me." "Devil's Crossing is on my route," Charlie said, the implications settling in. "If Blackwell succeeded, the entire region would be destabilized. Army troops wouldn't get paid, settlements would go unprotected, and the tentative peace with some of the native tribes, maintained partly through promised payments, would collapse. That's why I need to survive," Hollister whispered, "and that's why Blackwell can't let me reach Fort Laramie." As the first light of dawn colored the eastern sky, Charlie spotted the outline of Copper Creek in the distance. The small mining settlement wasn't much, a few dozen buildings clustered around a single main street, but it had what they needed, a doctor and temporary safety. What it didn't have, Charlie realized with growing dread as she spotted 6 horses. Tied outside the town's only saloon was anonymity. The Blackwell gang had arrived before them. "Change of plans," she murmured, veering Scout away from the main road and toward a small cabin half hidden among the pines at the edge of town. It belonged to an old trapper who'd once shown Charlie kindness when she delivered mail during a blizzard. If anyone would help them without asking questions, it would be him. As she approached the cabin, however, Charlie's heart sank. The door hung open, swinging slightly in the morning breeze, and there was no smoke from the chimney despite the early-hour chill. "Something's wrong," she said, drawing her revolver and scanning the tree line. "He never leaves that door open." Hollister stirred, his marshal's instincts cutting through the fever. "Trap!" he managed to whisper. Too late, Charlie heard the distinctive click of a rifle hammer being cocked behind her. "Well, well," came a deep, amused voice. "If it ain't the famous Charlie Morgan and our wounded marshal friend, mighty kind of you to deliver yourselves right to our doorstep." Charlie turned slowly, her gun hand steady, to face Jed Blackwell himself, flanked by 2 of his men, all with weapons trained on them. Now, Blackwell continued, his smile not reaching his gold eyes, why don't you tell me everything the Marshal shared with you about that gold shipment? Charlie's mind raced as she stared down the barrels of Blackwell's guns. Her fingers tightened around her revolver, calculating the odds, 3 against 1, with a wounded Marshal who could barely sit upright. Not good. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, keeping her voice steady and low. I'm just a mail carrier who found a dying man. Whatever business you have with him ain't mine. Jed Blackwell stepped forward, his weathered face splitting into a cruel smile. The morning sun glinted off the long scar that ran from his left eye to the corner of his mouth, a souvenir, it was said, from the last lawman who'd tried to bring him in. Funny thing about that, Blackwell drawled. Mail carriers don't usually change their routes to help wounded marshals, and they certainly don't head straight for old Emmett's cabin. He gestured toward the abandoned trapper's dwelling. Poor Emmett. Wasn't very forthcoming about your usual habits, even after we persuaded him. Charlie's stomach turned at the implication. Where is he? Feeding the worms by now, one of Blackwell's men snickered. Marshal Hollister stirred behind her. His breath labored, but his voice surprisingly firm. Let the carrier go, Blackwell. Your quarrel's with me. Blackwell's attention shifted to the Marshal. Oh, I don't think so. You see, once you started whispering about gold shipments and army payrolls, this became everybody's business. His eyes narrowed. Dismount, both of you. Charlie weighed her options. If she surrendered, they were dead. If she fought, they were probably still dead, but at least she'd go down fighting. As she prepared to make her move, a distant sound caught her attention. Hoofbeats, approaching fast from the direction of town. Blackwell heard it too. He spun around, momentarily distracted, and Charlie seized her chance. She fired a shot that caught one of his men in the shoulder, then kicked Scout into motion, charging straight at Blackwell and forcing him to dive out of the way. Bullets whistled past them as they thundered toward the trees. Hollister slumped against her, barely conscious. Again, the hoofbeats grew louder. At least 3 riders coming up the trail. More of Blackwell's gang, most likely. Hang on, Charlie muttered, veering Scout off the path and into the dense forest. The big Mustang navigated the terrain with practiced ease, putting distance between them and their pursuers. When they reached a small stream half a mile later, Charlie finally allowed Scout to slow. Blood soaked through Hollister's bandages, and his skin burned with fever. We need to find you a doctor, she said, more to herself than to him. Hollister's eyes fluttered open. Can't trust anyone in Copper Creek. Blackwell's bought half the town. Then we're going to have to fix you up myself, Charlie decided, guiding Scout up the stream to mask their trail. I know a place. 2 hours later, they arrived at a small cave hidden behind a waterfall. Charlie had discovered it during her first year as a mail carrier when
I
a
always
freak
thought that
blizzard
turning
had forced her to
35
seek
would feel
shelter.
more significant.
She'd stocked it with emergency
That somehow the day would
supplies,
arrive with a sense of
food,
gravitas,
ammunition, medical
of
items,
undeniable
and return
adulthood.
periodically to replenish
Instead,
them. After
I
securing
woke up on my
Hollister
birthday
inside,
to an
she
empty
tended to
space
his
beside me
wound,
in our
which had
king-sized
reopened
bed, and
during their escape.
the faint scent of my
The
husband's
Marshal
cologne
drifted
lingering
in
on
and
his
out
pillow.
of consciousness as
Daniel
she
had left
worked,
early, which
occasionally
wasn't
muttering
unusual.
names and places
As
that
a
meant
financial
nothing to
advisor
her.
for high-net-worth
Sarah,
clients,
he
his
whispered
schedule
once,
often
his hand
demanded
gripping
early
Charlie's
mornings
wrist
and late
with surprising
nights.
strength.
What
Don't
was
trust
unusual
Sarah.
was the absence of a
Who's
birthday
Sarah?
card on my
Charlie
nightstand,
asked,
or a
pressing
text
cool
message
cloth to
wishing
his
me
forehead.
happy birthday.
His eyes,
In the 8
suddenly
years
clear
we've been
and
married,
focused,
Daniel had
met
never
hers.
forgotten.
My
He's
wife,
probably planning
she's
something,
working
I told
with them.
myself,
Charlie
padding into
stilled.
our ensuite
Your wife
bathroom to
is
start my
working with
morning
Blackwell.
routine. My
Hollister
reflection
nodded
stared
weakly.
back at me.
Found
Dirty
out
blonde hair falling just
week
past
ago.
my shoulders.
She's
Green
his
eyes that Daniel once said
sister.
reminded
married
him of
me
sea glass.
to
A few
get
more fine
information.
lines around my eyes than I
The
remembered having
revelation
last year.
Stunned
I was
Charlie.
running my
She'd
fingers
heard of
through my hair
Blackwell's
when I noticed
ruthlessness,
it.
but to use
Daniel's
his
wedding
own
ring
sister
sitting on
as
the
a
edge of the
spy,
sink.
embedding her
He
in
never
a
took it
marshal's
off.
life for years.
Not for showers,
That was
not
a
for
new
sleep,
level of cold
not for
calculation.
anything. A
That's
cold
why
sensation
I
spread
was
through my
alone.
chest as I
Hollister
picked it up.
continued, each
The
word an
platinum
effort.
band still
Couldn't
warm
trust
as if it had only
my own
recently been
deputies.
removed.
Don't know who else.
My phone buzzed
She's
from the
turned.
bedroom, and I
Charlie
nearly
considered
dropped the
this new
ring.
information.
In my rush
If
to grab
Blackwell
it,
had
expecting
infiltrated the
Daniel's name
marshal's
on the
office so
screen,
thoroughly,
instead,
no wonder he'd known
it was
about
my
the gold
best friend,
shipment.
Olivia.
No wonder he'd been able to
Happy
track
birthday,
Hollister
Megan.
so easily.
Ready for
You
lunch?
need to rest,
I'm dying to
she
give you
said
your
finally.
present.
I'll keep watch.
I stared at my husband's ring as I
Hollister
responded.
drifted back to
Thanks,
sleep,
Liv.
Charlie moved
we push
to
it
the
to
cave
dinner?
entrance,
Something's come up.
staring out at the
Everything
wilderness
okay?
beyond the
Not
waterfall's
sure.
veil.
I'll fill you
For
in later.
3 years,
I tried
she'd
Daniel's
maintained
cell.
her disguise
It rang 4
and her
times before
solitude,
going to voicemail.
trusting no one, relying
Hey,
only on herself.
you've reached Daniel Warren.
It had
Leave a
kept her
message.
alive. It
Daniel,
had kept her free.
it's me.
Now, in the
found
space
your
of a
ring.
day, she'd
Call me
become
back,
entangled in a
please.
conspiracy that
By
threatened
noon,
not just
he
her
still hadn't
livelihood,
responded,
but the entire
and the cold
territory's
feeling in my
stability.
chest had transformed
and she'd allied herself
into a
with
hard
a
knot
marshal
of dread.
who, by his own admission,
This wasn't like
couldn't
him.
trust his
Even
closest
during our worst
companions.
arguments,
The smart
Daniel had
play
never gone
would be to
completely
leave
silent.
now.
Never
Take
disappeared.
Scout, abandon
I called his
Hollister,
office.
and disappear
Warren
into the
Financial.
vast frontier.
How may I direct your call?
She could start over somewhere.
Hi,
else
Stephanie,
create
it's
a new
Megan.
identity.
Is Daniel in
find
today?
new work.
A pause.
But something held her back.
Too long to be
Perhaps
normal.
it was the knowledge that if
Mrs.
Blackwell
Warren.
succeeded, countless
I
others
thought
would
you
suffer.
knew.
Perhaps it was a sense of
Daniel
duty
took a
to the
personal
mail
day today.
and settlements she served.
The knot in my chest tightened.
Or perhaps it was the
right.
simple fact
Must have slipped my
that
mind.
for the first time
Thanks,
in
Stephanie.
3 years,
I hung up and
someone
immediately
knew
dialed
her
his best
secret
friend,
and hadn't
Eric.
condemned her for
Megan?
it. As daylight
birthday.
faded, Charlie
Thanks,
made her
Eric.
decision.
Have you heard
She
from
would
Daniel
see this
today?
through, help
Another
Hollister
pause.
complete his mission.
What was it with
then
everyone
vanish.
pausing before
it wasn't just
answering me
about
today?
the gold anymore.
Not since yesterday.
It was about proving
Everything
that
okay?
a woman could do what the
I'm
men around her
not
couldn't
sure.
or
He
wouldn't.
wasn't home when I woke
She was
up,
checking
and he
her
left his
weapons
wedding
when
ring
Hollister
behind.
stirred
He's not
again.
answering his phone.
His fever had broken,
His ring?
and his eyes
Eric's
were clearer
voice
when
sharpened.
he looked at her.
That's not good.
Your real name,
I know.
he said quietly.
Can you think of where he might
It
go
isn't
if,
Charlie, is it?
if something was
She
wrong?
hesitated,
Maybe
then
the
shook
lake
her
house?
head.
You know how he likes to
Charlotte.
clear his head there.
Charlotte
The
Morgan.
lake house. Our weekend
Thank you,
retreat
Charlotte,
that we'd
he
purchased
said,
3 years ago.
surprising her
A small
for
cabin
not
2
leaving me
hours
to
north of
die
the
when
city.
any sensible
It made
person
sense.
would have.
If
Don't
Daniel
thank
needed
me yet,
space, that's
Marshal,
where
she
he'd go.
replied. We're still
Thanks,
a long
Eric.
way from
I'll
safety.
try there.
Hollister attempted
Let
to
me know
sit
when
up,
you find him,
wincing
okay?
with the effort.
And
We need to
Megan,
get to Fort Laramie.
whatever's going
Warn
on,
them
I'm
about
sure
the
there's an
ambush.
explanation.
You're in no
But the
condition
gentleness
to
in
travel
his
that
voice
far,
told me he was
Charlie
already
objected.
assuming the
And
worst.
Blackwell's likely watching
I grabbed my
all
keys
the main
and purse,
trails.
then
we don't
hesitated.
take the main trails,
What
Hollister
if Daniel
said,
came home while I was
determination
gone?
hardening his features.
I should leave a
You're
note.
the best guide in the territory.
As I reached
or
for
so
a
they
notepad
say.
on the kitchen counter,
If anyone can
I
get us
noticed
there
our
unseen,
shared iPad lying
it's
there.
you.
Maybe he'd used it
Charlie
recently,
considered their
and there would be
options.
some clue.
Fort
I
Laramie
shouldn't have
was 4
looked.
days hard ride,
Some part
even
of me
taking
knows
the
that
direct
now.
route.
But
Going
in that
cross-country
moment,
to avoid
driven by an
Blackwell's
increasingly
men would
desperate
add at
need
least
to
2
understand
more
what was
days.
happening, I
And
tapped
with
the
a
screen.
wounded man who could
It lit up
barely sit
immediately.
upright. There
Open
might
to
be
Daniel's
another way,
email.
she said slowly.
The message
A
displayed was
faster
sent
way
this
to get
morning
word
at
to Fort
6:18
Laramie
a.m. to
without
his
you having
assistant,
to make the
Stephanie.
journey.
Taking
How?
a personal day.
Hollister asked.
Please
The
reschedule all
telegraph
appointments.
line,
Will be
Charlie
unreachable.
explained. There's a station
DW
at
below
Wilson's
it was
Creek,
another email.
about a day's ride
This one from
here.
an address I
If we
didn't
can get
recognize.
there, send a wire warning the fort about the
Chloe.parker87@gmail.com.
ambush.
The subject
Blackwell
line
would have
read,
thought of that,
Re.
Hollister
Today's the
argued.
day. My
He'll
finger
have men
hovered
watching
over
the
it.
telegraph
My breath
offices.
caught.
Not this one,
In my
Charlie
throat.
said with certainty.
Then I
It's
tapped it.
new, just installed
Daniel,
last month.
I can't believe
I
we're
delivered
finally
the
doing
equipment
this.
myself.
I've packed
Most
everything
folks
as we
don't
discussed.
even know it's operational
Meet me at
yet.
7:30 at our spot,
Hope
and then we're
flickered
free.
in Hollister's
No more hiding,
eyes.
no more stolen moments.
One day's ride.
I know this is hard,
Charlie nodded.
especially on her birthday.
But we'll need to leave
But a clean
tonight,
break is better.
under cover
She
of
deserves
darkness.
someone who loves her
And
completely,
you'll need to be
and
strong
I
enough
deserve
to
all of
stay
you.
on a horse.
See you soon.
I'll manage, he said grimly.
See, the
Just
iPad
need a
slipped
few
from my
more
hands,
hours rest.
clattering onto the
He
counter.
studied her face with newfound
Chloe.
respect.
The name
Why are you doing this, Charlotte?
was vaguely familiar.
Why risk your life when you
Hadn't
could
Daniel
walk
mentioned
away?
a new client named Chloe
She
a
turned
few months
away,
ago?
uncomfortable
My
with the
mind
question.
reeled, trying to piece together
Same.
when this might have
Reason
started.
you became a marshal,
How I could have missed the
expect.
signs,
Some things are worth
especially
fighting
on her
for,
birthday.
even if nobody knows
The
you're
words words
one
burned
fighting,
into my
he
vision.
pressed. Charlie's
chosen
jaw
today
tightened,
deliberately,
especially then.
my birthday,
She moved toward the
to
cave
run
entrance
off with
again.
another woman.
Get some rest, Marshall.
Don't remember driving
We
to the
leave
lake
at
house.
nightfall.
The
As
2-hour
darkness
journey
settled
passed in a
over the
blur of
mountains,
numbness,
Charlie
punctuated by
prepared.
moments
And
of
for their
searing
journey,
clarity.
She changed
8
Hollister's
years of
bandages
marriage,
one final
the fertility
time,
treatments
noting
we'd
with
been
relief
discussing,
that the wound looked
the anniversary
cleaner.
trip to
The
Bali we'd
inflammation
planned
reduced.
for next month.
He wouldn't be winning any races,
All lies.
but he'd live.
When I pulled onto the
Assuming
gravel
Blackwell
driveway
didn't
of our
put a
lake
bullet
house,
in him
my
first.
hands were
I've
steady. Too
been
steady.
thinking,
I felt
Hollister said
disconnected
as she
from my
helped him to
body,
his feet.
as if
About
watching
your
myself from a
disguise,
distance as I
Charlie
walked to the front
tensed.
door and
What
used
about
my
it?
key.
It's good.
The
he
cabin was
acknowledged.
empty,
Very good.
but someone had been
But
there
if Blackwell
recently.
gets close enough,
2 wine
he might
glasses
see
sat
what
on the
I
coffee
saw.
table,
And unlike me,
one with a
he
smudge
won't
of
keep your
lipstick,
secret.
a shade I never wore.
What are you
I
suggesting?
walked through
she
each
asked
room
warily.
mechanically.
Change
The
in
bedroom
strategy,
told the final
Hollister
story.
replied.
Rumpled sheets,
Instead of
the
hiding
scent of
who
unfamiliar
you are,
perfume,
we use it to
a
our
woman's
advantage.
earring on the nightstand.
Outside the
Not
cave,
mine.
the night was
Never mind.
clear and cold.
I
Stars
sank onto the edge
spreading
of the
across
bed,
the sky
finally
like
allowing
diamonds
tears to
on
fall.
black velvet.
My phone
Charlie
buzzed
secured
again.
the last of their supplies
Olivia.
to Scout's saddle,
Meg?
then helped
It's been
Hollister
hours.
mount. His
What's
movement
going on?
slow, but
I tried to
steadier than
speak,
she'd
but only a
expected.
sob escaped.
As she swung up
I'm
behind
coming
him,
over,
the
she said
marshal spoke
immediately.
again,
Don't
his
move.
voice low but determined.
I'm not at home, I managed.
Tell me, Charlotte,
I'm at the lake
how do you
house.
feel about playing the role
The
of
lake
my
house?
wife?
Why? Because
The
that's
question
where
hung
Daniel
between
brought
them in
her.
the cold night air.
Her?
Charlie's grip
What are you
tightened on
talking
the
about?
reins. Your wife,
His mistress.
she repeated flatly.
The woman he left
The
me for.
same wife who
today,
betrayed you to Blackwell?
on my birthday.
The one who's his sister?
The silence on the other end lasted
Exactly.
only a
Hollister
second
nodded,
before
grimacing as
Olivia's
Scout
voice came back,
began to
tight with
move.
controlled fury.
Sarah
I'll
left
be there in
Fort
2 hours.
Laramie a week
Don't do
ago,
anything until I
supposedly
arrive.
to visit her
After
sick
hanging
mother.
up, I
Few
sat
people
motionless,
know what she looks
staring
like
at
outside
nothing.
the fort.
Then
With
my
the
gaze
right
fell
story.
on Daniel's laptop bag in
You
the corner.
think I can impersonate
He never
her,
went
Charlie
anywhere
finished,
without it,
understanding
which
dawning.
meant he'd be back.
Walk right past
Or
Blackwell's
perhaps
men,
he'd left it
because
deliberately.
they'd never suspect
Another
the
piece
woman
of his
they're
life
looking
he
for
was
would ride
shedding.
openly into town.
I moved toward it, driven
It's
by the
risky,
same self-destructive
Hollister
impulse
admitted,
that had made me check
but
the
less
iPad.
risky than trying to
More
sneak a known
evidence?
mail
More
carrier and
pain?
a wounded marshal
What was I hoping
through.
to find?
Their lines.
Inside
Charlie
was his
guided
laptop,
Scout down a
a
narrow
notebook,
deer trail,
and a small
barely
velvet
visible
box.
in the moonlight.
My
Her
hand
mind
trembled
worked
as
through
I
the
lifted
angles.
it.
It was
Too
a good
big for a
plan,
ring.
tactically speaking.
I opened it
but it
slowly
meant
to reveal a
abandoning
beautiful
the disguise
emerald
that had
necklace.
protected her for years.
My birthstone.
If I
There
do this, she said
was
finally,
a small card
there's
inside.
no going back.
To my Megan
Charlie
on her
Morgan
35th birthday.
disappears.
The
I can't
first of
return
many
to
we'll
my
celebrate
roots,
in our
my
new
life.
adventure.
Hollister was quiet for a long
All my
moment.
love.
I know
Daniel,
what I'm
I stared
asking,
at it,
he said
uncomprehending.
finally, and I have no right
A
to
birthday
ask
gift?
it. But
From the
thousands of
husband
lives
who had just
depend on
abandoned
stopping
me for another
Blackwell.
woman. And then I saw
They
the
rode,
notebook.
in silence
I flipped it
for
open
several
to find
miles.
a
The only sounds the
handwritten
rhythm of
list,
Scout's hooves
finished
on the forest
paperwork,
floor, and the
birthday gift for
occasional cry
M,
of a
final
nightbird.
meeting while
Dawn
Chloe
was still
Ree,
hours away
Parker
when
account
Charlie
transfer,
finally spoke
pack
again.
overnight
Tell
bag
me
for
about her,
surprise,
she said.
confirm
Everything.
reservation,
How she
our
moves,
vineyard,
talks,
get
what
ring
she knows
cleaned.
that I would
My
need
head
to know.
spun.
Relief
Nothing made
colored
sense.
Hollister's voice.
The emails,
She's
the empty
educated,
bed, the
speaks
wine
with a
glasses,
slight
the
southern
lipstick,
accent.
they all told
Virginia
one story.
originally
But the necklace,
carries herself like
this
someone
list,
born to money.
they
She's-
suggested something
as
entirely
they rode
different.
Through the night,
The sound
Hollister
of
painted a
tires on
picture
gravel
of the
cut
woman
through my
who had
confusion.
shared his life
A
and
car door
betrayed him.
slammed.
Sarah
Footsteps.
Hollister,
Approached.
née Blackwell,
I
cultured,
stood frozen,
well-read,
the velvet
charming,
box still in my
with
hand,
a ruthless
as the front
core
door
hidden
opened.
beneath layers of refined
Daniel
manners.
stood there, his expression shifting from surprise to confusion
By
to alarm.
the time the eastern sky
Megan?
began to lighten,
What are you doing
Charlie
here?
had a clear understanding of the role she
This wasn't
needed
supposed
to
to
play.
happen. Yet,
She'd spent years
behind him appeared a
observing
woman,
people at mail
slim,
stops,
dark-haired,
learning how
professionally
different
dressed.
types of men and
She
women
looked
presented
equally startled
themselves.
to see me.
It had
Mrs.
been
Warren, she
essential
said,
to her
I'm Chloe
disguise.
Parker,
Now
your
those
husband's
same
new client.
skills would
She
serve
glanced
a
at
different
Daniel.
purpose. They stopped
I think
at
we
a
have a
small
problem.
creek just after
Think we
sunrise.
have a problem.
While
Think we
Hollister
have.
rested,
For several seconds,
Charlie
nobody
opened her
moved.
saddlebag and
I
removed
stood
a
clutching the
carefully
velvet
wrapped
box
bundle
containing
she
the
hadn't
emerald
touched in
necklace,
3 years.
staring at my husband and the woman he'd
Inside
called
was
Chloe
a
Parker.
dress, simple
The same
but
name from the
well-made,
email that had
and a
shattered my
few
world just
feminine
hours ago.
accessories she'd kept as her
Client?
only connection to her.
I
former
finally
life.
managed, my voice
Insurance,
barely above
she
a whisper.
explained when she saw Hollister's
Daniel stepped toward
questioning
me,
look.
confusion
In case
etched
I ever
across his
needed to
face.
disappear completely, become
Megan,
someone else.
what's going on?
Guess that time
You weren't
has
supposed
come.
to be here until
she
tonight.
disappeared behind a stand of trees
Tonight?
to change.
I repeated
the
numbly.
dress felt strange
For your
after
birthday
years
surprise.
in men's clothing.
His eyes dropped to the
Restricted
velvet
around
box
the
in my
waist,
hand,
the skirt
then darted
brushing
to his
against her
laptop
legs
bag
with
open on the
every
couch.
movement. She
Understanding
unbound around her
dawned in his
chest,
expression.
washed the trail dust
You found
from
the
her
necklace
face,
and
and
my
let her
notes.
hair down from where it
Chloe
had
shifted
been
uncomfortably
tightly
by the
pinned
door.
beneath her hat.
I should
When
give
she
you two
emerged,
some
Hollister's
privacy.
eyes widened.
No,
My
I said
God,
sharply,
he
finding my
whispered.
voice.
The
I think you
transformation
should
is
explain the email.
remarkable.
Daniel and
Charlie
Chloe
shifted
exchanged
uncomfortably
bewildered
under his
glances.
gaze. Will it
What
fool
email?
Blackwell's men?
Daniel asked.
It would fool me.
I pulled out my phone,
Admitted,
opened the
and I knew
iPad
what to
synced
expect.
email app,
The sun
and thrust
was
it
fully
toward
risen
them,
by the time
displaying
they
the
approached
damning
Wilson's
message.
Creek. Unlike
Today's
Copper
the
Creek,
day.
it was a respectable
I've packed everything as we
settlement,
discussed.
a church
Meet me at
steeple
7:30
visible
at our
above the tree
spot,
line,
and then we're free.
smoke rising from several
Chloe's
chimneys,
eyes
the
widened
distant
as she
sound of
read.
a sawmill
Then
in operation.
unexpectedly she laughed.
Charlie
The sound was
adjusted
so
her posture as
incongruous
they
with the
neared
tension in the
town,
room that I
straightening
nearly
her
flinched.
back, lifting her
Oh,
chin,
God,
adopting
she
the bearing
said,
of a
covering her
woman
mouth.
born to
I
privilege
see the
rather
problem.
than hardship.
Mrs. Warren,
When she spoke,
Megan,
the rough edges
I
in her
corrected
voice had
automatically.
been smoothed away,
Megan,
replaced
I'm
with
not
the gentle
having an affair with your
cadence of a
husband.
southern lady.
I'm his client.
Remember,
And I'm also
Hollister
engaged to be
murmured,
married
as
this
the first
weekend.
buildings came into
My
view.
gaze dropped to her
You're
left hand,
Sarah
where an
Hollister,
impressive
concerned
diamond
wife
ring
coming to
sparkled.
find her
How had I
injured
missed that
husband after
before?
receiving news of an ambush.
The email was about
"And
a
you're
surprise I'd been
James
planning for my
Hollister,"
fiancé.
she replied
She
in
continued.
her new voice.
Daniel
"Too
has been
stubborn to
helping me
die
with
and
financial
too proud
arrangements to
admit when
purchase
you
a
need
vacation
help."
property.
That
Our
earned
own
her a
lake house,
pained
actually.
smile.
That's why
"You've
we're
got
here
the roll
today,
down already."
to finalize the
The
paperwork for a
telegraph
similar
office
property
was
down the
located
shore.
at the end of the main
I looked at
street,
Daniel, who
a
was
small building
staring
with
at
a
me with
freshly
growing
painted
concern.
sign. As
But you
they
left your
approached,
wedding ring,
Charlie
I
noted
said,
with growing
my
unease
certainty beginning
that
to
several
crumble.
rough-looking
It was
men
on the bathroom
loitered
sink this
nearby,
morning.
watching the
Daniel's
traffic
hand flew
with
to
too
his
much
bare ring
interest to
finger,
be casual
his expression
observers.
shifting to dismay.
Blackwell's
I
men,
took it off to
she
clean it
whispered,
last night.
keeping her smile
It was on my
fixed
list.
in place.
The jeweler said the settings
There,
were loose.
watching the telegraph,
He patted
after
his
all,
pockets
Hollister tensed
frantically.
behind her. Must have been more
I must have
thorough
forgotten
than
to
I
put it back
expected.
on.
Change of plan.
Megan,
We
did
need
you
another
think
way to...
that you
No,
were leaving me?
Charlie interrupted, her
On my
mind
birthday?
racing. We stick to
My
the
voice
plan.
cracked.
Get ready to
The
play
empty
your part,
bed,
Marshal.
the cryptic
Before
email,
he could object, she
your
nudged
assistant
Scout into
saying
a
you
faster
took a personal
trot,
day.
approaching
The
the men
wine
with the
glasses
confident
here.
air of someone
With
who
lipstick, the
expected to
rumpled
be
sheets.
obeyed. "Excuse me,
glasses?
gentlemen,"
Daniel
she called,
looked genuinely
her voice carrying the
perplexed.
perfect note
We
of
all turned
genteel
toward the coffee
urgency.
table where two
"I
used
need your
wine glasses
assistance.
sat,
My
one with
husband
a
is
distinctive
injured
lipstick
and requires
smudge.
immediate attention."
Chloe stepped closer,
The
examining
men
them.
straightened as she approached.
Those weren't there
their
when we
expressions
arrived.
shifting from
We just got
alert
here about
suspicion to
5
confusion
minutes before
and,
you.
she noted with
A chill
cold
ran down my
calculation,
spine.
appreciation.
Then who?
It had been a long time
The
since
sound of the
Charlie
back
had
door
used
opening
feminine
answered my
wiles
question.
to manipulate a
A
situation.
tall man with dark
But
hair
some
walked
skills
in,
never
stopping
quite
abruptly when he saw
disappeared.
the three of us standing in
"Mom?"
the living room.
One of the men
Jason,
stepped
Chloe
forward,
exclaimed.
clearly
What are
the
you doing
leader.
here?
His hand
The
remained
man,
close to his
Jason,
gun,
looked
but
equally
his posture
shocked.
had relaxed
Chloe,
slightly.
I was
"Thank
just dropping
heavens,"
off the...
Charlie exclaimed,
He stopped,
allowing a
noticing
tremor of
Daniel
fear
and
to
me.
enter her voice.
Who
"We
are
were
they?"
attacked on the road from Fort
This is
Laramie.
Daniel Warren,
My husband,
financial advisor,
he's barely
Chloe,
conscious." The
said
men
slowly.
exchanged glances, their
And his
attention
wife,
shifting
Megan.
to Hollister.
Daniel,
slumped
Megan.
Against
This is Jason
her.
Reeves,
The marshal
my
played his part
fiancé.
perfectly, his face
Jason's
drawn
surprise
with
gave way
genuine
to a
pain,
flash of guilt
his
before he
eyes
carefully
unfocused.
composed his expression.
"What's your
Nice to
business
meet you.
in Wilson's Creek, ma'am?"
How did you get
the
in?
leader asked,
Daniel
suspicion
asked.
edging back into
The back
his
door
tone.
was unlocked,
"I
Jason said
received
too
word
quickly.
that my husband
I
had
moved toward the
been
coffee
injured
table,
in an
pointing to the
ambush,"
wine
Charlie
glasses.
explained,
Are these
allowing
yours?
tears to well
Jason
in her
stared
eyes.
at the glasses,
"I
then
set
at
out
Chloe,
immediately
who was
from
watching
Fort
him with
Laramie
growing
to find
suspicion.
him. We encountered more
Jason?
of those terrible
Chloe's
outlaws
voice
just yesterday.
had dropped
They
to
seemed
a
to be hunting
dangerous
him
octave.
deliberately." She
Whose
described
lipstick
a
is that?
location in the
The
opposite
back door
direction
opened again,
from where they'd
and a blonde
actually
woman in her
encountered
20s peered
Blackwell,
in.
watching as two of the
Jason,
men exchanged
did you find
significant
the...
glances.
She froze
"Your
when she
husband
saw
have a
all
name,
of us.
ma'am?" the leader
Oh.
asked.
The pieces clicked
"James
together in an
Hollister,
instant.
United
The wine
States
glasses,
Marshal," she
the
replied
rumpled
proudly,
sheets,
then leaned
the
forward
unfamiliar
as if sharing
perfume,
a confidence.
the woman's earring.
"Though I sometimes
Jason
think
and this
the badge
unknown blonde
means
had
more
been
to
using
him
our
than
lake
I do."
house. Not
That
Daniel
earned
and
her
Chloe.
a chuckle from one of the men,
Amber?
and she noted
Chloe's
how their
voice was
hands
barely
moved
controlled.
slightly away from their
My
weapons.
maid of honor?
They were still
A
suspicious,
thick,
but the
uncomfortable
immediate threat
silence
had
filled the
eased.
room as the
"We need
tangled
to get
web
him
of
to a doctor,"
misunderstandings
she
and betrayals
continued,
became
"and
clear.
I must send word back to
I wasn't
Fort
the one
Laramie
being
about
cheated
these
on.
attacks.
Chloe
The
was.
marshal was carrying
And
important
I had jumped to
information.
catastrophic conclusions about my
Information.
own marriage
The
based on
leader's
circumstantial
attention
evidence.
sharpened. Charlie put on her
Daniel
best expression of feminine
moved to my
ignorance.
side, gently
Something
taking the
about
velvet box from my
schedules
hand.
and roots.
I was planning to bring
military
you here
business,
tonight.
he said.
I've spent
You know
weeks
how men
organizing
are
a surprise
with their
party for your
important
birthday.
secrets. A look passed
party?
between the men that
I echoed
confirmed
weakly.
Charlie's suspicions.
Everyone's
These
coming
were
up this
definitely
evening.
Blackwell's
Olivia,
lookouts,
Eric,
tasked
your
with
sister,
monitoring the
all our
telegraph
friends.
office. But they
He
hadn't been
glanced at
told
his
to look
watch.
for a woman,
Well,
and they
in about
clearly
4
hadn't
hours,
seen the real Sarah
I
Hollister
took the day
before.
off to set everything up.
The
But I had
doctor's
this
just
final
down the
meeting
street,
with
Mum.
Chloe first.
1. of the men
I
offered,
leaned against him,
pointing to a
relief
small
washing
house
over
with a
me in such a
shingle
powerful
hanging
wave that my
outside.
knees nearly
We'd be
buckled.
happy to help you get the marshal
I thought you were
there.
leaving.
Charlie noted
Me?
how eager
Never,
they suddenly were
he
to
whispered,
separate
wrapping
Hollister
his
from
arm
the
around my
telegraph
waist.
office.
Across the
Perfect.
room, an
Oh, would
entirely
you?
different
She
drama
gushed.
was unfolding.
But first, I
Chloe
simply
was
must send
confronting
this
Jason
telegram.
and Amber,
Fort Laramie
her
will be
voice
so worried
rising
when
with
they
each
learn what's
accusation.
happened. She
Jason was
dismounted
fumbling
gracefully,
through denials that
managing
grew
to
less,
support Hollister while
convincing by the
maintaining her
second,
ladylike
while
demeanor.
Amber looked like she wanted
Perhaps
the
one of
floor
you
to swallow
strong
her
gentlemen
whole.
could help my
How
husband
long?
while I
Chloe
see to the
demanded.
telegram.
It was just
It
a
will
few
only
times,
take a moment.
Jason said
The
weakly.
men hesitated.
It didn't mean
clearly
anything.
torn between
We're getting
their
married in
assignment to
3
watch the
days.
telegraph
Daniel
and their
cleared his
desire to
throat.
separate the
Maybe
marshal
we should give
from
them some
any
privacy.
communication with
We
Fort
stepped outside
Laramie.
onto the porch.
I'll
The
stay with your husband,
sounds of the
Mom,
escalating
the leader
argument
said
fading
finally.
as Daniel closed the
Dawson,
door behind
why
us.
don't you escort the lady to
For
the
a moment,
telegraph office?
we stood in
Make
silence.
sure she gets the help
The
she
afternoon
needs.
sun warming my face as
meaning
the
behind
emotional
his words was
whirlwind of the
clear to
past few
Charlie.
hours began to settle.
Dawson was to monitor what
I'm so sorry,
message she sent,
I finally
ensuring
said,
she didn't
leaning
warn the
against
fort
the porch
about the
railing.
gold shipment ambush.
I saw that email
How
and just
kind,
spiraled.
she smiled, accepting
Daniel took my
Dawson's
hand,
offered arm with
his thumb
demure
gently
gratitude.
caressing my knuckles.
As they walked toward the
I should have
telegraph
been
office,
clearer about
she
everything.
felt Hollister's eyes
And
on
I
her
definitely
back
shouldn't have
and
left
knew
my ring
he
on the sink.
understood her strategy.
That was careless.
Now
He
she
reached
just
into his
had to
pocket and pulled
execute
out
it.
my birthday
The
gift,
telegraph.
opening the box
Operator,
again.
a bespectacled
This was supposed to
young
be the
man
first
barely
part
out
of your
his
surprise.
teens, looked up as they
The
entered.
emerald necklace
Good morning,
glittered in
ma'am.
the sunlight,
How may I assist you?
even more beautiful
I
than
need
I'd
to
first
send
realized.
an urgent telegram to
It's
Fort
your
Laramie, Charlie
birthstone,
explained, her
he
voice
explained
trembling slightly.
unnecessarily.
My husband,
And
Marshal Hollister,
He
has
turned
been
the pendant
gravely
over
injured
to
by
reveal a
outlaws.
tiny inscription
The
on the
fort
back.
must be notified
Look
immediately.
closer.
The
I
operator
squinted at the
nodded,
delicate
readying
engraving.
his equipment.
For new beginnings.
What message would you like to send,
New
Mom?
beginnings? I
Charlie
asked,
was acutely
looking up
aware
at
of
him.
Dawson hovering nearby,
Daniel took a deep breath.
pretending to examine a notice board,
I thought it was
but
appropriate,
clearly listening
considering
to
the
every
news
word.
I got yesterday.
She would only get one chance
His
at
eyes
this.
shone
Please
with what I
send the
now
following, she
recognized
said
as
clearly.
excitement,
Attacked on trail,
not guilt.
stop Marshall injured, but
Remember
alive,
that
stop,
fertility
requires
specialist we saw
medical
last
attention
month?
at Wilson's Creek, stop.
My heart stuttered.
She paused,
We'd been
as
trying
if
to have a
gathering her
baby for
thoughts,
nearly 2
then
years,
continued.
with nothing but
Please
disappointment
inform
each
Colonel
time.
Richards.
Daniel,
Schedule change necessary.
he called
Stop
yesterday with
advised.
our latest
Rerouting
results.
Tuesday
The
shipment
treatment
via
worked,
Northridge
Megan.
to
The new
avoid
approach
Blackwell
worked.
gang at Devil's
There's nothing
Crossing.
stopping us from
Stop.
starting a
Sarah
family now.
Hollister. Stop.
Tears welled
the
in my
operator's
eyes as his
fingers
words
tapped out
sank
the
in.
message as Dawson's
was what he'd been
attention
planning.
shifted fully to her.
To tell me tonight,
His casual pose
not that he was
abandoned.
leaving,
She
but that
had
our
just
greatest
sent
wish might
explicit
finally
warning
come
about
true.
the ambush plan,
That's
but
what I meant
couched it
by
as a
our
route
new
change
adventure in the card.
recommendation.
He
Exactly
continued,
the sort
wiping a tear
of
from my
thing a
cheek.
marshal's wife might
I
include
wanted tonight to be
if she were
perfect.
concerned about her
All our
husband's
friends and
safety.
family here to
Is that
celebrate
all,
both your
ma'am?
birthday
The
and this
operator
new
asked.
chapter.
Yes, thank you.
I threw my arms
Charlie
around
replied,
him,
opening her purse to
burying
pay.
my face
How
against
soon
his
will they
chest.
receive it?
I feel
Right
so
away, ma'am.
stupid.
The line to Fort
Don't,
Laramie is
he
clear
murmured
this
into my
morning.
hair. If
As
I'd
they
found what you
exited the
found,
telegraph office,
I probably would have
Charlie
assumed
noted
the
the
worst
tightness in
too.
Dawson's expression.
The door behind
he
us
was trying
opened,
to
and
decide
Chloe emerged
if her
alone.
message had been
Her
innocent
eyes
or if she
red-rimmed,
somehow
but
knew
her
more
posture
than she
still
should.
straight. I'm
Your
sorry
husband
about
must
that,
be very brave,
she said with
he
remarkable
said carefully,
composure.
as they walked
It
back
seems
toward
I was
where
the one
Hollister
being
waited with
deceived,
the other men.
not you.
Facing down
Chloe,
outlaws like that.
I'm so
He's
sorry,
foolishly
I said,
dedicated to his
genuine
duty,
empathy
Charlie
replacing the
replied,
jealousy and
with just the
suspicion
right
I'd felt
mixture
toward
of
her just
pride
an
and
hour ago.
exasperation.
She waved
Always
away
putting himself in
my
danger
sympathy
for others.
with a brittle smile.
I keep telling him the
The
territory
wedding's
isn't
off,
worth
obviously,
dying for, but
but
he
we
never
still
listens.
have business to
Dawson
conclude,
studied
Mr.
her
Warren,
face.
if you don't mind.
Sounds like you don't much
I'd like
care
to
for his work,
finalize the
ma'am.
property paperwork.
Charlie allowed a flash
It seems
of
I'll
genuine
be needing a
emotion
place of
to
my
show
own
through
after
her
all.
carefully constructed facade.
Daniel looked at me
I
questioningly.
care for my
I
husband,
nodded.
sir.
Go ahead.
The badge
I
is
should
simply
call
the
Olivia
cross
anyway.
I bear to be
She's
with him.
probably halfway
They
here
had
by now,
nearly
thinking
reached
she needs to
Hollister
help me
when
bury a
shots
body.
suddenly rang out from the far
As Daniel
end
and
of the
Chloe
street.
went back
People
inside,
scattered,
I pulled out my
diving for
phone to
cover
call
as
Olivia,
horses thundered
still
into town.
processing the emotional
Riders
roller
firing
coaster
into
of the
air.
day.
At their head,
From believing my
unmistakable
marriage was
even at a
over to
distance,
discovering a new
rode Jed
beginning was on the
Blackwell
horizon,
his
all
red
on my
bandana
35th
visible
birthday.
like a splash of blood
Some
against
celebration
the dust.
this was turning out to be.
Sarah!
Was
he
turning out
called,
to be.
his voice
Was turning
carrying
out.
down
So
the street.
let me get this
Dear
straight.
sister, I heard
Olivia
you were in
said,
town.
perched on the edge of the
Time
deck chair
slowed
beside
to a
me as we
crawl
looked out over
as
the
Charlie
lake.
processed Blackwell's
You thought
words.
Daniel was having an
In
affair with
instant,
Chloe,
a
but actually
precarious
Chloe's
masquerade
fiancé was
shattered.
having an affair with her
Dawson's
maid
hand
of
moved to his gun,
honor, and
suddenly
they were using your
recognizing
lake
the
house to
deception.
do it?
The men surrounding
That about
Hollister
sums it up,
tensed.
I
Their
replied,
earlier confusion
taking a sip of the
crystallizing into
emergency
deadly
wine she'd
purpose.
brought when I
I
called to
believe
explain the
there's
situation.
been a misunderstanding.
Olivia shook her
Charlie
head in
said,
disbelief.
her voice steady,
And all this
despite
happened
the
on your
fear
birthday,
clawing at her
the
throat.
same day Daniel was planning to tell you
Blackwell
about the
dismounted,
fertility treatment
his
results
spurs
and throw you a
jangling
surprise
against the
party?
hard-packed dirt as he
The
approached.
universe has a twisted sense of
Unlike
humor.
his men,
Inside the lake
radiated
house,
brute
Daniel and
force,
Eric were
Jed Blackwell
setting up
moved
for
with
the party
fluid
that would
grace
begin
of a
in less than
mountain
2
lion.
hours.
Elegant,
After Chloe had
measured,
left,
and absolutely
alone,
lethal.
her engagement
No
officially
misunderstanding
terminated.
at all,
Daniel had
he
called Eric
replied,
to come early
closing the
and help
distance
salvage what
between
was
them.
left of my
You
birthday
see, my
surprise.
sister Sarah is currently
I
enjoying
still
the
can't
comforts
believe
of
you
our
jumped
family
to
cabin
my
near
husband
Fort
is leaving
Laramie.
me so
So
quickly,
you must be...
Olivia
His
said,
eyes narrowed
giving me
as
a thoughtful
recognition
look.
dawned.
That's
Well,
not like you,
I'll be
Meg.
damned.
You're
the mail
usually the
carrier,
rational
Charlie
one.
Morgan.
I stared
Hollister
out at the
struggled
water,
to stand,
considering her
pushing away
observation.
from the men who'd been supporting
I
him.
think it was finding
She's
his
got
wedding
nothing
ring.
to do with this,
He never
Blackwell.
takes it off.
This is between you
I
and me.
twisted my own ring
On
absently.
the contrary, Blackwell
And then that
smiled,
email? It
revealing a
seemed so
gold
clear.
tooth that gleamed in the morning
But things
sun.
aren't always what they
Your
seem,
lady
are
friend
they?
just sent a most interesting
Her
telegram.
tone held something I couldn't
about
quite
rerouting
identify.
shipments and avoiding
Clearly
ambushes.
not, I agreed.
He turned to Dawson.
Though I do feel bad for Chloe.
You had one job.
Finding out your fiancé
Dawson
is cheating with
paled.
your maid of honor 3 days
She-
before your wedding.
I didn't think.
That's
That's
brutal.
always been your problem.
Olivia hummed
Blackwell
in agreement,
sighed.
then reached
Then
for her
drew
bag.
his revolver and
Speaking
shot
of your
Dawson between
birthday,
the eyes.
I still have
the
your
sound
present.
echoed down the street like
She
a
pulled out a
thunderclap.
wrapped package and
Women
handed it to me.
screamed. Men
You
ducked
didn't
for
have
cover.
to.
The telegraph
Of course I
operator
did.
peered out his
It's your
window,
35th.
then quickly dropped the
That's
shade.
a milestone.
Charlie used the moment.
I
of
carefully
shock
unwrapped
to
the
reach
gift
for
to
the
find a
derringer
beautiful
hidden in her
leather-bound
dress
photo
pocket.
album.
A precaution
Opening
she'd
it, I
taken
found it
before
filled with
entering
pictures
town.
spanning my
But
entire
Blackwell was
friendship with
faster,
Olivia.
grabbing her
From
wrist
college
and twisting
through my
until
wedding to
pain
holiday
shot up her
gatherings and
arm. Not
weekend
so
trips.
fast, Miss Morgan,
Liv,
he whispered,
this is
his breath
amazing.
hot against her
Keep
ear.
going,
Or
she
should I call
encouraged.
you Charlotte?
The last page
That
is the
your
best
real
part.
name, isn't it? Charlie
I flipped
froze.
to the final page
How?
where I found a
Could he
single
possibly
photo of
know
Olivia
that?
and me from
Reading
just
her
last
surprise,
month. Arms
Blackwell
around
laughed.
each other at her
You
lakeside
think you're
cabin.
the only one with secrets.
Tucked into the
I make it my business
corner
to know
of the
everything
page
about
was a small
everyone who
envelope.
crosses my territory.
Inside was a
including
card that
mail
read,
carriers
"For your
who
next
aren't what they
chapter."
seem. Across
Your
the
journey
street, Hollister
inspired
had
me to
managed
start
to draw
my
his
own.
gun,
Appointment
despite his
confirmed for
wounds.
next
He
Tuesday
stood
at 2 p.m.
unsteadily,
Dr.
weapon
Melissa
aimed
Chen,
at Blackwell's
fertility
head.
specialist.
Let her go.
I looked up at Olivia.
Drop it,
stunned.
Marshal. One
You're
of
starting
Blackwell's men
fertility
growled,
treatments?
pressing
She
a gun
nodded,
to Hollister's
suddenly
temple.
looking nervous.
Or die where you
After
stand.
seeing how you and
For a tense
Daniel have
moment, no
handled
one
the whole
moved.
process,
Then with
the
deliberate
disappointments,
slowness,
the hope,
Hollister lowered
the
his weapon.
perseverance, it
Smart
made me
choice,
realize I don't
Blackwell
need to
nodded.
wait for the perfect
I need you both
relationship
alive.
to start
For
the
now.
family I've always
He
wanted.
turned to his men.
Liv,
Secure the
reached for her
telegraph
hand.
office. Make
You're going to be
sure
an amazing
no more
mother.
messages get through.
I hope so,
Then gather our
she
guests.
said, squeezing my
We're taking a
fingers.
little trip.
I've lined up a
Within
donor
minutes,
through the
Charlie
clinic's
and Hollister
program,
found
and I was
themselves
hoping,
bound and loaded
well,
into a wagon,
that you might come with me to
surrounded
the
by
first
Blackwell's
appointment.
men.
Since
As
you're
they left
practically an
Wilson's Creek
expert on the
behind,
process by
Charlie
now,
caught a final glimpse
I'd
of the
be
telegraph
honored.
office.
Tears
Smoke was
welled in
rising
my
from
eyes
its
for what
roof.
felt like the
They're
100th
burning
time
it,
that
she
day.
whispered,
But these were happy
destroying any
tears.
evidence of the message.
Our kids could grow up together.
Doesn't matter.
That's what I was
Hollister
thinking.
replied quietly.
She
The warning was
smiled, then
sent. Fort
glanced at her
Laramie will
watch.
change the shipment route.
We should probably
which is
go help the
exactly
guys.
what I wanted.
Your guests will be
Blackwell
arriving
called
soon.
from his horse alongside
Inside,
the wagon.
Daniel
At
and
their
Eric had
startled
transformed
looks,
the
he
living
chuckled.
room.
Oh,
String
come
lights
now.
twinkled from the
Did
ceiling
you really
beams.
think I'd be
A happy
foolish enough
birthday
to share
banner
my
hung across the
actual plans
fireplace,
with someone like
and several
Sarah?
gift bags sat
The
on a side
devils.
table.
Crossing
The
ambush was
wine
a
glasses
decoy.
that had caused
A
so
story
much
fed to my
confusion
dear
earlier
sister
were
to pass
long
along
gone,
to her husband.
replaced by champagne
Horror dawned
flutes,
on Charlie's face.
arranged
You
neatly
wanted the
on a
shipment
tray.
rerouted.
Daniel
To
looked up as we
Northridge
entered,
Pass.
his face
Blackwell
lighting up when he
confirmed
saw
with a
me.
predatory smile.
Even after
Where
8
my
years of
main
marriage,
force
that look
is
still
already
made my
waiting.
heart skip.
Thanks to your helpful telegram,
Just in
the
time,
gold
he
will be
said.
delivered right
We
into
need
my
a woman's
hands.
opinion on the food
Hollister
arrangement.
sagged against the wagon's
I
wooden
moved to his
side,
side,
the weight of
leaning
comprehension
into him as he
etched
slipped
into
an
his
arm around
features.
my waist.
You used
Everything
your own
looks
sister.
beautiful.
Used me.
Wait until you see
All
what
of it
else
was
I
a
have
setup.
planned.
From
He
the
murmured
beginning.
close to my ear.
Family is
That
the
necklace
ultimate
was
weapon,
just the
Marshal.
beginning.
Blackwell
Eric Eric cleared his throat.
his tone almost
And that's my cue to
philosophical.
check on the ice
Sarah
situation.
played her part beautifully.
He headed for the
though
kitchen,
she never knew the full
Olivia
scope
following
of
to
my
help.
plans.
Alone
just as
for a
our
moment,
mail-carrying friend
Daniel
here
turned to
played
face me.
hers.
Are we
He
okay?
studied Charlie with new
After
interest.
everything? That happened
Though
today.
I must admit,
I
your
considered the
performance
question,
surprised
thinking
me.
about the emotional
Where did a
whiplash of the
frontier
past several
mail
hours.
carrier learn to impersonate
We're
a
more than
southern lady
okay,
so convincingly?
I said finally.
Charlie remained silent,
But I think we need to work
refusing
on our
give him the
communication.
satisfaction of an answer.
If I'd known about
It
your
didn't
meeting with
matter
Chloe,
now anyway.
or
They
why
were
you'd
both
taken off your
as
ring,
good as dead,
you're right,
and the gold
he
would be
agreed
taken
immediately.
regardless of what
And if
she
I'd
said.
told you about the
wagon
fertility
jolted over the rough
specialists
trail,
call right
each
away
bounce
instead of
sending
planning
spikes
this
of
elaborate
pain through
surprise.
Hollister's wounded side.
But then it
Charlie
wouldn't have
had
been a
positioned
surprise,
herself to absorb
I pointed
some
out.
of the impact,
Daniel
using her body
smiled,
to shield
tucking
his
a strand
injury
of hair
as
behind
best
my
she
ear.
could with her hands
True.
bound.
Though
I'm
I could have done
sorry,
without the
he
part where
murmured, his voice
you thought I was
barely
leaving
audible
you.
over the wagon's
I shuddered at the
creaking.
memory of those dark
I dragged
hours.
you into this.
It felt
I
so
made my
real,
choice,
Daniel.
she replied simply.
Reading that email,
Then
finding the
even
evidence here.
quieter. We're not
I've
finished
never been
yet.
so terrified.
As they traveled,
I'm
Charlie
sorry.
mentally mapped their route,
His expression
noting
grew
landmarks,
serious.
calculating distances.
I never want you
They
to
were
feel that
heading
kind of
northwest,
fear again.
away from the main roads,
From now
deeper
on,
into the
no
rugged country
secrets,
she knew better than
even
anyone.
for surprises.
Blackwell
We
might
tell each
think
other
he held
everything,
all, the cards,
good or bad.
but he'd made one
Deal.
critical mistake.
I
He'd
sealed
brought
the
her into
promise with a
territory
kiss,
she'd
which was
traversed
interrupted
100
by the sound
times
of
as a
car
mail
doors
carrier.
closing outside.
Hours passed.
First
the sun
guests are
reached
here,
its zenith
Daniel said.
and began its slow
Ready for your
descent
party,
toward
birthday
the
girl?
western mountains.
I
Charlie
nodded,
observed
pushing
Blackwell's
aside the
men,
lingering
counting
emotional
weapons,
exhaustion from
assessing
earlier.
weaknesses.
This was
Most
still
were
my birthday,
trail-hardened outlaws,
and now there was even
but a
more
few
to celebrate.
seemed newer to the gang, less comfortable
Over the
with
next
violence.
hour,
One in
our
particular, a
closest
young
friends
man
and
with
family
a shock
arrived.
of red hair,
My sister
kept
Kate
glancing
and
at
her
her
husband
with
from
something
the
like
city,
shame in his eyes.
colleagues from both our
When they stopped at
workplaces,
a creek to water
neighbors
the
from back
horses,
home.
Charlie seized her opportunity.
Each new arrival brought
As
another
the
layer
red-haired
of
man
warmth
brought
to
her
the
a
gathering,
canteen, she whispered,
another reminder
"You
of
don't
the
belong
community
with these men."
we'd built
He
together.
startled, nearly dropping
When
the water.
everyone had assembled,
"Shut up.
Daniel clinked his
What's
glass
your
for
name?"
attention.
She pressed.
Thank you all
After
for
a
coming on such
hesitation.
short notice to
"Eli,
celebrate Megan's
listen
birthday,
to me,
he
Eli.
began.
When Blackwell
Some of you
gets
may
that
not
gold,
know this,
he'll
but
eliminate
today
anyone
has
who could
been
threaten his claim
eventful.
to it, including his
A
own
ripple
men.
of laughter moved through the crowd.
Doubt flickered across
Eric
his
had
face.
apparently been filling
"You're
people
lying."
in on the day's
Ask yourself
misunderstandings.
why he shot Dawson without
But
hesitation.
that's not the only reason we've asked
Charlie
you here,
urged.
Daniel continued.
That'll be you
We
once
also
you're
have
no
some
longer
news to
useful.
share.
Before
He looked
Eli
at me,
could respond,
silently asking
Blackwell
permission to
approached,
proceed.
making friends,
I
Charlotte.
nodded,
His
stepping
gaze
closer to his
shifted
side.
to Eli. "Get
After a
back to the
long
horses.
journey, he
Now."
said, his voice thick
As
with
Eli
emotion.
hurried away,
We've
Blackwell
received
crouched
news that our
beside
latest
Charlie.
round of fertility treatments
"You're
has been successful.
wasting your breath. My men are loyal.
The path is
To
clear for us
gold,
to start
maybe,"
the family
Charlie
we've been
retorted.
hoping for.
"Not to you."
Cheers
Something
erupted,
dangerous
along with a
flashed in
few
Blackwell's
happy tears
eyes.
from those who knew how
Bold
long we'd
words
been
from a woman
trying.
who spent years
My sister
pretending
pushed
to be
through
a
the
man.
crowd to hug me
Tell
fiercely.
me, what drove you
I'm
to such
so
extremes?
happy for you,
Money?
she
Or was it something more
whispered.
personal?
As the celebration
Charlie
continued
met his
around
gaze
us,
unflinchingly.
I found myself watching
Freedom.
Daniel across the room. He was
Charlotte
engaged
nodded,
in
gazing
conversation
at the
with
frontier
Eric and a
town
few
nestled
others,
in the valley
but his
below.
eyes kept finding
New
mine,
beginnings,
as if he
she
couldn't
echoed.
quite believe
I
how
think I'm
close
ready
we'd
for
come
that.
to misunderstanding each other
Silver
so
Peak
profoundly.
proved to be everything
I
Hollister
touched
had
the emerald
promised
pendant
and
now
more.
hanging around my neck.
Unlike the rough
For
and
new
tumble
beginnings.
settlements, Charlotte had known
Despite the
during her
chaotic
mail
start,
carrier days.
my 35th
This was a
birthday had turned
community
into a
with
day of
aspirations,
unexpected
a
revelations
school
and
under
renewed
construction,
commitment, both
businesses
to each
run
other
by
and to the
families
future
rather
we'd
than
been working
drifters,
toward.
and a general sense
Penny
of
for your
permanence
thoughts?
that spoke of
Olivia
people who had
appeared
come
at
to
my
stay,
elbow,
not
offering a
just to
fresh glass
extract
of
what
sparkling
wealth
water.
they could before moving
Just thinking
on.
about how differently this day
Within
could
a
have
month,
ended, I
Charlotte had
admitted.
established herself as
If
the
I hadn't
town's
found
mail
Daniel's
service
notes,
consultant,
or if I'd left
training a
before he
team
arrived,
of young riders
Chloe?
in the techniques
But
that
you
had kept
didn't,
her alive
she pointed
for
out.
3 years.
You
She
stayed.
taught them how to
You
read
gave him a
weather
chance to
patterns,
explain.
identify safe shelters,
Because I wanted
recognize
answers,
hostile
not because
territory,
I trusted him in that
and most
moment.
importantly,
I confessed,
how to become
the guilt
invisible
still
when
fresh.
danger approached.
Olivia considered
Always
this.
remember, she
Trust
instructed
isn't
her
always
small
blind
class
faith,
of eager
Meg.
pupils.
Sometimes it's being
The
willing to
mail,
listen even when
getting
everything
through
seems to
matters
point
more
in the
than your
wrong
pride.
direction.
If you sense
Before
trouble,
I could
avoid
respond,
it.
the
Better
sound
to
of
arrive
breaking
late
glass
than
drew
not at
everyone's
all.
attention to the
Her
kitchen doorway,
reputation
where
spread quickly through
Eric
the
stood
territory.
looking mortified
The
beside
riders
a
she
shattered
trained
champagne flute.
survived routes that had
Sorry,
previously claimed
he called
lives,
sheepishly.
and mail delivery
got a little
rates improved
enthusiastic with the
dramatically.
toast preparation.
Charlotte found herself
As
invited
people
to
laughed and
neighboring
moved to help
settlements
clean
to
up,
establish
Daniel
similar
made his way to my
programs.
side.
Her
"Having
expertise
fun?"
valued
he
in a
asked,
way it never
his
could have
fingers
been
finding
when she
mine.
was hiding
"The
behind
best
Charlie
birthday I never
Morgan's
expected
identity.
to have."
Hollister, meanwhile,
I replied
brought a
honestly.
steady,
"It's not
principled
over yet,"
approach
he
to
said
law
with a mysterious
enforcement
smile.
that the growing
"I have one more
community
surprise planned
desperately
for
needed.
midnight."
Unlike
Is it a
many
surprise
frontier
I'm going to
marshals
like,
who
or
ruled
another
through
one that might give me a
intimidation
heart
or
attack?
favoritism,
I teased.
he established
Definitely
clear
the first
procedures
kind,
and
he assured me.
expectations,
Though
treating
after
wealthy
today,
mine
I'm
owners and
thinking I should
ordinary
probably
workers
just tell you,
with the same measured
no,
respect.
I interrupted.
Their paths
Surprising.
crossed frequently,
Myself.
professionally. At
Keep it a
first,
surprise,
then personally,
despite
as they
everything, I
cautiously
trust you.
explored the connection that had
And I
formed
did,
during their
more
dangerous
deeply
journey.
than I'd realized
True
during
to
those
their
dark
agreement,
hours when I'd
they
believed the
moved
worst.
slowly, learning
Because
who they
when
were
faced with what
beyond the
looked
roles
like
they played.
irrefutable evidence,
Tell me something about
some part of
Charlotte,
me had still
Hollister
needed to
would sometimes
understand,
ask during their
to hear
evening
his
walks
side of the story.
along Silver Peak's
That was
quiet
why I'd
streets.
stayed at the lake house
Something
instead of
Charlie
driving
Morgan
away.
kept hidden.
That, I realized,
At first,
was the
these
foundation
questions
we
made
would
her
build our
uncomfortable.
next chapter on.
The habit of secrecy
Not
deeply
blind
ingrained.
trust, but the
gradually,
commitment to listen,
Charlotte found
to seek
herself sharing
understanding,
pieces of
to
her
give
history,
each other the benefit
her
of the doubt,
childhood on a
even when
struggling
circumstances
Kansas farm,
suggested
the
otherwise.
loss of her parents to fever,
As the evening
her
progressed
brief
and I
marriage to
moved
a
among
man
our
who'd
friends
seen
and
her as
family,
property
I found
rather than a
myself filled
partner.
with
He
a sense
died
of
in a
anticipation
mining
rather than
accident
dread
2
about
years
what
after we
midnight might
wed,
bring.
she explained one evening
Whatever
as they
Daniel
watched
had
the
planned,
sunset from the hill
whatever
overlooking
challenges our
town.
future held,
I mourned
we
him,
would face them
but
together,
I also felt
clear-eyed,
free.
honest, and
Is
connected.
that terrible? No,
My 35th
Hollister
birthday
replied simply.
hadn't
It's honest.
started the way I'd
In turn,
expected,
he shared
but it was
his own
ending
truths,
exactly where I
his
needed to be,
working-class
where I
Philadelphia
needed to be,
upbringing, his
where I
journey
needed.
west
As
as
the
a young
evening
man
progressed,
seeking purpose,
the lakeside
the
cabin filled
idealism
with the
that had led
warm
him to
buzz
take
of
up a marshal's
conversation and
badge,
laughter.
and the slow
Despite the
erosion
chaotic
of that
start to my
idealism
birthday,
through years
I found
of
myself
violence and
genuinely
compromise.
enjoying the
Sarah
celebration
was part
Daniel
of
had
my
planned.
attempt to build something
Friends
normal, he
mingled
admitted,
throughout the tile,
something stable
open living
amid
area,
all the chaos.
spilling onto the
I
deck
think I
where
wanted
string
the
lights
idea of
reflected
her
off the
more
dark
than I
water
ever truly
beyond.
knew the woman herself.
My sister Kate cornered me
As
by the
summer
refreshment
turned to
table,
autumn,
her
their
expression still a
cautious
mix of
friendship
amusement and
deepened
disbelief.
into something
Only
more.
you could mistake
Their
a
first
surprise
kiss
party for an
happened
affair,
naturally, without
she
fanfare,
teased,
as they
refilling her wine
returned from
glass.
investigating reports
Most people
of
just
claim
pretend to
jumpers
be
in the high
surprised when they
country.
find out.
One moment they were
Very
discussing
funny,
evidence.
I
The
said,
next,
nudging her
Hollister
with
had
my
gently
elbow.
pulled Charlotte
You try
close,
finding your
their
husband's
conversation
wedding.
giving way to
Ring
something
abandoned
more
on the bathroom
elemental.
sink and see where
Their
your mind
courtship
goes.
raised eyebrows
Kate's
in
smile
Silver
softened.
Peak, not because
Seriously,
of disapproval,
though, are you okay?
but because
That
of
must
how
have been
they
a
defined
terrifying
it.
few hours.
Charlotte maintained
I
her
considered her
independence,
question,
refusing to
watching
be seen
Daniel
merely
across
as
the room as
the
he chatted
marshal's
animatedly
woman.
with a
She
group
kept
of
her
our
separate
friends.
residence, ran her
I'm
male
better
training
than
program
okay,
on her own terms,
I admitted.
and occasionally
It was
disappeared
like
into the mountains
having
alone
the rug pulled
when
out
she
from
needed
under me
space
and then suddenly
and
finding
solitude.
solid ground.
You're not worried?
Again.
The banker's wife
It makes
once
you
asked
appreciate
Hollister
that
at a
ground
town
even
gathering,
more.
watching as
Poetic,
Charlotte conversed
Kate
animatedly
remarked.
with a group
But
of
I'm
miners
still going to tease you
trail
about this for years to
conditions.
come.
A woman that
I'd expect
independent
nothing
might
less.
just ride off one
I
day.
laughed.
Hollister
The
smiled,
conversation
his
shifted
eyes
as
never
Kate
leaving
updated me on her
Charlotte.
latest work
If she does,
project.
it will be her
But I found
choice,
my attention
and
drifting
I'll
to where
respect it.
Olivia stood alone
His
on the
faith
deck,
was rewarded as
gazing
autumn
out at the
deepened
lake.
toward
Something
winter.
about her posture,
Far from
shoulders
riding away,
slightly hunched,
Charlotte found
arms
herself
wrapped
putting
around
down
herself
roots in
despite the
Silver
mild
Peak,
evening,
the first real
suggested
home
she
she'd
needed
known
company.
since her parents' farm.
Excuse me,
Her mail
I
service
said to
expanded,
Kate, making
adding
my way
a freight
outside.
component that supplied remote
Olivia
mining
didn't turn as I
operations through
approached,
weather too
though she
severe
must have
for
heard the
less
deck door slide
experienced
open.
carriers. Her
I leaned
riders,
against the railing
men
beside
and
her,
women alike,
giving
as
her
she'd
space to speak
insisted on
first if she
training
wanted.
both, became known
I'm
throughout
having
the
second
territory
thoughts,
for their
she finally
reliability
said,
and courage.
her voice barely
Winter
audible
brought
above
heavy
the lapping
snows
of
that
waves
temporarily
against the shore.
isolated Silver Peak
About the
from
fertility
neighboring
treatments.
settlements.
Because
During those quiet
Because
months,
what if I'm
Charlotte
being
and Hollister's
selfish?
relationship
She turned to
deepened
face
further.
me,
They spent long
vulnerability evident in
evenings
her
by her
expression,
fireplace,
choosing
planning
to have a child
improvements
without
to
a
the
partner,
town's communication
without that
systems,
built-in support system
designing
you and Daniel
emergency
have.
procedures for the harsh
I had
mountain
never seen
winters,
my
and
confident,
sometimes
decisive friend
simply
so
reading
uncertain.
in comfortable silence.
Live. Being a single parent by
It was
choice
during
isn't
one such
selfish.
evening
It's
that
brave.
Charlotte first noticed the letter.
Is it?
A cream-colored
is
envelope
it unfair
with
to the
elegant
child?
handwriting,
Her eyes
partially
shimmered with
concealed
unshed
beneath
tears.
a stack of wanted posters
I mean, look at
on
today.
Hollister's desk.
When you thought Daniel was
James,
cheating,
she said
you
quietly,
weren't just devastated
indicating
for
the
yourself.
That
You were
handwriting,
devastated for what it
he
meant for
followed
your
her
future
gaze, his
family,
expression
your plans
darkening as he
together.
recognized it.
I
It
reached for her
arrived
hand.
last week, weak, he
Every
admitted.
family looks different,
From
Liv,
Sarah,
and any child would be
Charlotte
lucky to
felt a
have
cold
you as their
weight
mother,
settle in her stomach.
with or without a partner in the
What
picture.
does she want?
I just
Hollister
keep thinking
retrieved
about
the letter,
the deck
holding
door
it as
slid
if it
open
might
again,
bite.
and Eric stepped
Forgiveness,
out.
supposedly.
There
she claims
you are,
Blackwell
he
forced
said,
her participation,
with a relieved
threatened
smile.
her if she didn't spy for him.
We're about to cut
His
the
voice
cake.
held no conviction.
Olivia quickly wiped her
She's in
eyes
San
and plastered on a
Francisco now.
smile.
Wants to explain
Can't
in
miss
person.
that. she said with
"And?"
forced cheerfulness,
Charlotte prompted,
squeezing my
studying
hand
his
once
face
before
carefully.
following Eric inside.
"And nothing," he
I
replied
lingered for a
firmly.
moment longer,
"Whatever we had
making a
was
mental
built
note
on
to continue this
lies.
conversation
There's
with her
nothing
later.
she could say that
Olivia
would
had been
change
my
that."
rock through
He
years of
moved to throw
fertility
the letter
struggles.
into the fire.
I intended to be
Charlotte caught
hers
his
through
wrist.
whatever path she
"Keep
chose.
it," she advised.
Inside,
As
Daniel was
evidence,
waiting with a
Sarah
beautifully
was never
decorated
found or
cake
charged for her
ablaze
role
with
in
candles.
Blackwell's operations. This
As everyone
proves
sang
she's
happy
alive,
birthday,
places
I found
her
myself
location.
overwhelmed with
Hollister nodded
gratitude.
slowly, recognizing
Just hours
the wisdom
ago,
in her words.
I'd been convinced my marriage was
"Always
over.
the practical one,"
Now I was
he said
surrounded
with a
by
faint
loved
smile.
ones, wearing the
"One of
emerald
us
necklace
has
Daniel
to
had
be,"
given me,
she returned
looking
lightly,
forward to the
but the
future
moment
we would
had
build
changed
together.
something between them.
"Make a wish,"
The past,
Daniel
which had seemed
whispered as the
safely
song
buried,
concluded.
had reached out to touch
I
their
closed
present.
my eyes,
That night,
drew a deep
after
breath,
Hollister had
and blew
returned
out
to his
all
own
35
quarters,
candles in
Charlotte
one go.
found herself restless,
The party
pacing her
continued for
small
another
cabin
hour before
as
guests
snow
began
fell
to depart,
silently outside.
each leaving with warm
Sarah's
hugs and
letter had awakened
congratulations on
doubts
both
she'd
my
thought
birthday
resolved,
and our
not
fertility
about
news.
Hollister's feelings. She
Soon
trusted
only
those
Kate,
were
her
genuine,
husband
but
Olivia,
about
and
her
Eric
own
remained,
place in this
helping
new
with
life.
cleanup while suppressing
Was she
yawns.
truly Charlotte Morgan
"You
now?
should all head back,"
Or was she still
Daniel
hiding,
suggested,
playing yet
noting the
another
time.
role? No longer
"It's almost
the male
midnight
mail
and the drive
carrier,
is pretty
but
dark."
now the respectable
"Are you sure?"
frontier
Kate
businesswoman.
asked,
Sometimes
glancing
she still
around
woke
at the
reaching
remaining
for a
party
gun,
debris.
her heart
"We
pounding
can stay and finish
from
cleaning."
dreams of being pursued
"Absolutely,"
through
I
endless
assured her.
mountain passes.
"The rest can wait until
Sometimes
morning."
the walls of her cabin
After
seemed
a
to
final
close in
round
like
of
a
hugs
trap,
and goodbyes,
making her long
we
for the
watched their
open trail.
headlights disappear down
Morning
the gravel
found her at
driveway,
the stables before
leaving
dawn,
Daniel and me alone in
saddling
the suddenly
Scout for a
quiet
ride
cabin.
despite the heavy snow.
"Did you
The
have a
aging
good
Mustang
birthday,
greeted her with the
despite
same
everything?"
quiet
he
trust
asked,
he'd shown
wrapping
through
his
all their
arms
years together.
around me from
And
behind as we
Charlotte
stood
felt
in
a
the
pang
doorway.
of affection
"The
for
best?"
the animal
I said
who'd been her
truthfully,
only
"though
constant
maybe next year we
companion
can skip the
during
part where
her
I think
years
you're
as
leaving
Charlie.
me." "Deal."
"Just a short ride,
He kissed
old
the top
friend,"
of my head.
she murmured, patting
"It's
his neck.
almost midnight.
"To clear my
Ready
head."
for your final surprise?"
The winter landscape
Curiosity
spread before
piqued.
them,
I turned in his
pristine and
arms.
silent.
I thought
Charlotte
the necklace
rode
and
without
party
destination,
were the
letting
surprise.
Scout choose his
Those
path
were just
through
the
the familiar
beginning.
terrain. The cold
Taking my
air
hand,
burned her lungs,
he led me back out
but
onto
the
the deck.
sensation was clarifying,
"Close your eyes."
washing away the
I
confused
complied,
thoughts of the night.
feeling the cool night air against my skin
When she
as
reached the
Daniel
overlook
guided me
above
further
Silver
onto the
Peak,
deck.
Charlotte
The sounds of
reined
the lake
Scout to a
surrounded
stop.
us. Gentle
Below her,
waves, distant
the town
loon calls,
was coming awake,
the rustle of leaves in the
smoke
breeze.
rising from chimneys,
"Okay,"
lanterns
he
bobbing
said,
as early
positioning me
risers
carefully.
moved about their business.
"Open them."
From this
I
distance,
opened my eyes to
it
find the
looked
lake
like any other
transformed.
frontier settlement,
Dozens of paper
fragile and
lanterns
temporary
floated
against
on the water,
vast
their
wilderness.
soft glow creating
But
a path
it
of light
wasn't.
from our dock
This was
out into
home
the
now,
darkness.
her home by
Above,
choice
the night
rather
sky
than
was alive with
necessity.
stars,
She had built something
more visible here away from
something
city
real
lights.
and valuable.
"Daniel,"
She had
I breathed.
connections,
"It's
respect,
beautiful.
purpose,
Look there."
and she had
He
Hollister,
pointed toward the floating
a man who
lanterns.
saw her completely
As I
and
focused,
valued her
I realized they
independence,
weren't
rather
randomly
than fearing
arranged.
it. The
The
realization
lanterns
settled in her
formed
chest,
letters on the
warm
dark
and
water.
certain. She wasn't
Forever.
playing a role anymore.
"The
This
lake
was
where we
Charlotte
first fell
Morgan,
in love,"
the woman she
Daniel
had always
said
been
softly.
beneath the disguises.
"The place
She was
where we
about to
scattered
turn
your
Scout
father's
back toward
ashes,
town when
where we
movement on the
decided to
northern
start
trail
trying for a
caught her
family.
eye. A
And
single
now,
rider,
where we begin a
pushing
new
hard
chapter.
through the snow despite the
Tears
early
blurred
hour
my
and
vision as the
difficult
meaning of his
conditions.
gesture sank in.
Charlotte's years of vigilance
Daniel had
triggered
always
an
understood
immediate
how special
wariness.
this place
No
was to
ordinary
me,
traveler
how
would be
connected I
moving with
felt to the
such
memories
urgency in
we'd
these
created here.
conditions.
"How did you manage this
Nudging
without me
Scout down
noticing?"
a side path,
Eric
she
and I set them
intercepted the
up while you
trail
were
ahead
talking
of the
with
approaching
Olivia.
rider.
They're on timers,
From the shelter of a
set
stand
to light
of
up at
pines,
exactly
she
midnight.
observed the stranger,
As if on cue,
a woman
my phone
bundled
chimed the
against
midnight
cold,
hour.
but still
My
somehow
birthday was
managing
officially
an elegant
over,
posture
but
on
something
her fine
new was
bay
beginning.
horse.
"I know
As
today
the
didn't
rider
go
drew
as planned,"
closer,
Daniel
Charlotte's
continued,
suspicions
taking both
crystallized
my
into
hands in his.
certainty. The honey
But I
blonde
meant what I
hair
said
visible
earlier.
beneath the fur-lined
No more
hood,
secrets between
the
us,
refined
even for
bearing,
surprises.
the quality of the
Full
horse
transparency
and
from
tack,
now on.
all matched Hollister's descriptions of
transparency.
his
I
treacherous
agreed.
wife.
He hesitated, then
Sarah
reached into his
Hollister
pocket.
had come to Silver Peak.
Which is why there's
Charlotte
something else I
considered
need to
her
tell you.
options. She
Something
could
I've been
confront
saving
Sarah
for the right
directly, warn
moment.
her away from the town
My heart skipped
and
as
from
he pulled out
Hollister.
an envelope.
She could ride back back quickly,
What is it?
alert Hollister to his
The
wife's
complete
arrival,
results from
or
Dr.
she could
Chen.
simply observe,
He handed me the envelope.
learn why Sarah had
I
come
only
despite
told you the good
receiving no
part,
encouragement
that the treatment
from her
worked,
estranged husband.
that there are no more
Choosing
barriers.
the third option,
but there's more.
Charlotte kept Scout hidden
My
among the
hands trembled
trees as
slightly
Sarah
as I
passed.
opened the envelope,
Then followed
pulling
at a
out the
discreet
medical report
distance.
inside.
The woman
I scanned the
rode
document.
directly.
medical
into Silver
terminology
Peak,
jumping out at
drawing
me,
curious
until I
glances
reached
from
a highlighted
townsfolk
section
unaccustomed
halfway
to
down the
seeing
page.
well-dressed female
My breath
travelers
caught.
arriving alone. She
Is
stopped at the
this-
hotel,
Is
arranged
this
for
saying what I think
accommodations,
it's saying?
and then, surprisingly,
Daniel nodded,
headed not
his
toward the
expression a mix
marshal's
of
office,
excitement
but toward the
and
assay
apprehension.
office.
The hormonal
Charlotte
treatment was
tethered
more
Scout
effective
behind
than
the general
anticipated.
store and moved
Dr.
closer
Chen
on
says
foot,
the chances
her
of multiple
curiosity
embryos
overriding
successfully
in
implanting
caution.
has increased
Through the assay
significantly.
office window,
Multiple,
she observed
I
Sarah
repeated,
engaged
the
in
word
intense
feeling foreign
conversation
on my
with Harold
tongue.
Wilson, the assayer.
As in,
Both spoke with
twins are a
animated
strong
gestures,
possibility,
Wilson
he
occasionally
confirmed.
shaking his head,
Maybe even
while Sarah
triplets.
pressed her case with
The
increasing
world seemed to tilt
urgency.
slightly as I
Quite a sight,
processed
isn't
this
she?
new
Came
information.
a familiar voice from
After
behind
years
Charlotte.
of trying for
She
just
turned
one
to find
baby,
Hollister
the
standing
prospect
there,
of
his
multiples was
expression
overwhelming.
unreadable as he
I
observed
wanted to
his
tell you
wife
right
through the
away,
window.
Daniel continued,
You
watching
knew
my
she was
reaction
coming,
carefully.
Charlotte realized.
But I didn't want to
He nodded
overshadow your
once.
birthday with what might be stressful
Telegraph
news.
from Denver. Yesterday,
Stressful?
officials
I
there
looked up from the
recognized her
report,
from the wanted
a startled
bulletins,
laugh
but
escaping
couldn't
me.
legally hold her.
Daniel,
Not enough evidence.
this
They
is
warned me she'd purchased
incredible.
a ticket to Silver Peak.
You're not
His gaze
overwhelmed?
shifted from Sarah to
Of
Charlotte.
course I'm overwhelmed,
I was coming to
I
tell you
admitted,
when I saw Scout
but in
was
the
gone.
best possible way.
Why
We've
the
wanted
assay
this for so
office?
long.
Charlotte
One
wondered
baby,
aloud.
2 babies,
If
however
she's
many
here
we're
to see
blessed
you,
with.
because this
Relief
isn't
washed
about
over
me,
his features as he
Hollister
pulled me into an
replied grimly.
embrace.
It's about what's
Against his
always
chest, I
motivated
added,
the Blackwell family.
Though we might need a bigger
Gold.
house.
He gestured toward
He
the
chuckled,
office.
the
2
sound
weeks ago,
rumbling through him.
Wilson authenticated
One
a
step at a
significant
time.
strike in the North Ridge.
We stood
The
there
claim
on the
owner has
deck,
been quietly
holding each
gathering
other beneath the
investors before
star-scattered
announcing
sky,
it publicly,
the glowing lanterns
understanding
casting
dawn.
dancing
She's
reflections
here
on the
for
water.
the claim information.
After the
Her brother
emotional
may be
turbulence
dead,
of the
but his
day,
operation
from despair
continues.
to relief to
With
celebration,
Sarah possibly
this
in
quiet
charge now,
moment
Hollister
felt like the
confirmed.
true gift.
Wilson won't give her anything.
Happy birthday,
He's
Megan,
honest to a fault.
Daniel whispered.
But the fact that she's
And
trying
happy new beginning,
suggests she
I
hasn't
replied,
abandoned her
sealing the
brother's
moment
methods.
with a kiss as the
As if
floating
sensing
lanterns
their
continued to
scrutiny,
spell out
Sarah
our
looked
future
up
on the dark
suddenly,
water,
her
our
gaze
future on the dark
passing over
water,
the
our
window.
future. 2 weeks after my
Charlotte
birthday, life had settled into a
instinctively stepped
strange
back,
new normal.
But Hollister remained
Daniel
in
and I had
plain
returned
view,
to the city,
his eyes
our daily
meeting his
routines
wife's
resuming with
directly.
one
For a
significant
long
difference.
moment,
I now
neither
attended
moved.
fertility
Then
clinic
Sarah
appointments 3
excused
times a
herself
week,
from Wilson
preparing
and
my
headed
body
for
for the
door.
next phase
Charlotte
of treatment.
felt a surge of
The
protectiveness.
possibility of multiple
James,
babies loomed in our
It's
conversations,
all right,
both
he said
thrilling and
quietly.
terrifying.
This confrontation
We
has
should
been
start
coming
looking at
since
bigger
Rattlesnake
apartments,
Canyon.
Daniel
Better
remarked one
here,
evening as
in
we
the
sat on our
open,
living room
than
couch
anywhere
reviewing real
else.
estate listings.
Sarah
If we're
emerged from the assay office,
potentially having
her
twins
composure
or triplets,
perfect, despite
this 2-bedroom
the
isn't
shock
going
that
to
must
cut
have
it.
accompanied seeing her
Let's
husband.
not get ahead of ourselves,
She
I
approached
cautioned,
with measured
though
steps,
I'd been thinking the
stopping
same
a
thing.
respectable
We don't
distance
even know if
away.
the implantation will
James,
be
she
successful
greeted
yet.
him, her voice
Daniel
cultured
set
and
aside his
warm,
laptop to
as if
take
they
my
were
hand.
meeting at a social gathering
know,
rather than
But
across
Dr.
the
Chen
chasm
seemed
of her
very
betrayal.
optimistic at yesterday's
You're
appointment.
looking well.
She had been.
No thanks to
My
your brother.
hormone levels
he
were
replied
ideal,
evenly.
and everything was
Sarah's perfect
progressing
mask
perfectly.
slipped slightly.
The embryo
A flash
transfer
of
was scheduled for
genuine
next
regret
week,
crossing her
and then would
features.
come the
Jed's
anxious
actions
2-week
were
wait
his
to see if
own.
pregnancy
I
occurred.
never intended for you to be
I
harmed.
just don't want to jinx
just
anything,
for me to be used,
I admitted.
Hollister countered.
We've been disappointed
for
too many
information,
times.
For access to
Fair.
shipment
Enough,
schedules,
Daniel
for whatever
agreed.
else Blackwell
But maybe we
needed
could
from
just
a US
casually
Marshal's
browse.
office.
No
Sarah's
commitments.
gaze shifted to
I
Charlotte,
was about to
who had
respond when
stepped
my phone
forward to
buzzed
stand
with an
beside
incoming
Hollister.
call.
Recognition
Checking the screen,
and calculation
I was surprised to see
flickered in
Chloe
her
Parker's
eyes.
name. We'd exchanged numbers
she
after
said
the lake
softly.
house incident,
The mail
but I hadn't
carrier who
expected to hear from her
impersonated me.
again.
Charlotte,
It's Chloe,
isn't
I
it?
told Daniel, answering
Charlie
the
met
call.
her gaze steadily.
Hello?
That's right.
Megan?
A thin
Her voice
smile
sounded
curved
strained.
Sarah's lips.
I'm sorry to
How
bother you,
interesting.
but I didn't know
came
who else to
hoping
call.
reconcile with my
I
husband,
sat up straighter,
only to find
concerned
he's
by her
already
tone.
replaced me.
What's wrong? Are you okay?
She turned back to Hollister.
Not really.
Is she what you
She
wanted
gave a
all
hollow
along?
laugh.
James?
I'm at
Someone
Lakeside
rugged and
Hospital.
capable instead
There's
of
been an
refined?
accident.
Someone who would
My
share
stomach
your
dropped.
dangerous life
What
rather than
happened?
build a real home?
Jason was driving with
What
Amber.
I wanted,
The names of her
Hollister
ex-fiancé
replied.
and former
His
maid of
voice
honor sent a
controlled
jolt
but
of
intense,
recognition through me.
was honesty.
They were hit by a drunk
Something
driver
you
on
never
Highway
offered.
16.
Charlotte
It's
watched
pretty
the
bad.
exchange silently,
Oh my God,
studying
Chloe,
Sarah
I'm so
with the
sorry.
same attention
I
to
gestured
detail
to
that had
Daniel,
kept her
mouthing
alive on
hospital
dangerous
to explain
trails.
my alarmed
Despite
expression.
her elegant appearance
But
and
why are you
practiced
there?
manners,
After
Sarah
what they
Hollister
did? That's
radiated
the
a
thing,
predatory
she
awareness,
said,
not
her
unlike
voice
her
cracking
brothers.
slightly.
This was not a woman who had been
Jason listed
coerced
me as
into
his emergency
espionage.
contact,
This was
and
someone who had
apparently
embraced
never
it.
changed it
I came
after
to warn you,
everything.
Sarah said, her
The
tone
hospital called
shifting
me.
abruptly.
And when I
There are
got here,
people,
I
former
found out I'm
associates
still
of
his
Jed's,
medical
who
proxy.
blame you for his death.
That's a
They're
lot
not
to
as
deal with. I
discriminating as I
acknowledged,
am about who gets
trying
hurt
to
in the
understand
process
why
of
she was
revenge.
calling me specifically.
Is that
The
a
doctors
threat?
need decisions
Charlotte
made,
asked, her hand
she
drifting
continued,
toward her gun.
about his care.
Sarah smiled
And
again,
I don't know what
this
to do.
time with genuine amusement.
We were together for 4 years, Megan.
It's information,
Despite
freely
how it
given.
ended, I can't just...
What you do with it is your choice.
You can't just abandon
She
him.
glanced around
I
the
finished
quiet
for her,
town.
understanding dawning.
You've built something quaint here.
But you also
James,
don't want to face this
it would
alone.
be a shame to see it destroyed because of
Exactly.
old vendettas.
Relief colored her tone.
Silver Peak can take care of itself,
Would you...
Hollister stated firmly.
I know
And
this
so
is a
can
huge
I.
imposition.
If you came
But
hoping
would you
to
mind coming
manipulate
to the
me
hospital?
through fear or false
Just for moral
reconciliation,
support?
you've wasted
I
your
don't have
journey.
many friends in the city, and
Something
after
hardened in
canceling
Sarah's
the wedding,
expression.
most of our
The
mutual
pretense
friends
of
chose
the concerned
sides.
former wife
I glanced at
fell
Daniel,
away,
who was
revealing
watching me
the
with
cold
concern,
calculation
and made a split-second
beneath.
decision. Of course.
Have it your way.
Text me the details.
I tried to offer a warning,
I'll be there as soon as
a
I
chance
can.
to prepare.
After
Whatever
hanging up,
happens now
I quickly
is on
explained
your
the
head.
situation to Daniel.
She turned to leave, then
That's
paused, looking back at
unexpected,
Charlotte.
he
He'll
said,
never trust you
looking
completely,
confused.
you know. Not after
Why
me.
would she call
That
you,
doubt
of all
will
people?
always be there,
I
poisoning
think I might
whatever
be the
you think you're
only
building
person
together.
who witnessed what happened without
Before
being
Charlotte could
emotionally
respond,
invested in
Hollister
either
stepped
side.
forward,
I
his voice
reasoned,
quiet,
already
but
gathering
carrying
my purse and
absolute
jacket.
conviction.
Plus,
You're wrong,
finding out
Sarah.
about Jason and
What you
Amber's
did taught
affair
me to see
happened
more
at the
clearly,
same
not
time
less,
I
to
discovered
value
you weren't
truth
actually
over comfort,
leaving me.
substance
There's a
over
weird connection
appearance.
there.
He
Daniel
reached
nodded
out,
slowly.
taking Charlotte's hand in
Do
his.
you want me to come with you?
I know exactly who
No,
Charlotte Morgan
I think it's
is.
better if it's just
Because,
me.
unlike you,
I
she's
kissed him
never
goodbye.
pretended to be anything else.
Don't wait up.
Sarah's composure
This might take a
cracked
while.
just slightly.
The
Genuine
hospital was a
emotion,
30-minute
something
drive
like
across
envy,
the city.
flashing across
As
her
I navigated
perfect
evening
features.
traffic,
Then
I
she
reflected
turned
on
and
how
walked
quickly life
away,
could change.
her posture
From
rigidly controlled
planning a
as
wedding
she
to
headed
making
back
medical
toward the
decisions for an
hotel.
ex-fiancé in
Well,
just 2 weeks.
Charlotte said,
It put my own
as they
birthday
watched her
crisis into
go.
perspective.
That was illuminating.
I found Chloe in the
Hollister
surgical waiting
squeezed
room,
her hand once
looking smaller
before
than I
releasing
remembered
it.
in an
She'll be
oversized
gone
sweater.
by morning.
Her dark
Sarah
hair
never
pulled
lingers
back
where
in a
she's
messy
not
ponytail.
welcome. His
When she
expression grew
spotted me,
serious,
relief
but her
washed
warning
over
might
her
have been
exhausted
genuine. Blackwell
features.
had connections throughout
Thank
the
you for
territory.
coming,
Former
she
gang
said as I
members,
sat
business
beside her.
partners, family.
I know it's strange.
Charlotte nodded thoughtfully.
How are they doing?
Then we prepare.
I asked gently.
Alert the town council,
Amber's in stable
increase
condition,
patrols,
broken
establish
arm,
emergency
concussion,
procedures.
some internal bruising.
The challenges
Her
of
voice was
frontier life
detached,
had taught
clinical.
her always to plan for
Jason's
the worst
still in
while
surgery.
hoping for the best.
His injuries are more severe.
Together,
collapsed
we
lung,
can handle
ruptured
whatever
spleen,
comes.
head trauma.
As they
They're
walked
not sure
back toward
if
the center of town,
she trailed off,
snow
unable to
beginning
finish the
fall
thought.
again in gentle
I
flakes,
placed my hand over
Charlotte
hers.
felt a peculiar sense of
so
completion.
Sorry, Chloe.
The confrontation with
The
Sarah
thing is,
had closed a
she
circle that
continued,
began
staring
in
at the
Rattlesnake
institutional
Canyon
tile floor.
months ago.
I'm still so
The
angry
past
with him.
had been
Furious,
acknowledged
actually.
and could now properly
But
be
I don't
left
want him to
behind.
die.
That evening,
Of course
as they
not,
sat
I
before the
agreed.
fire in the
Those
marshal's
feelings
office
can exist
reviewing security
simultaneously.
plans,
You can be
Hollister
angry with
suddenly
someone
set
and still
aside his
care about what
papers
happens to them.
and turned to Charlotte
The doctors
with an
need to know
unusually
about continuing
serious
aggressive
expression.
treatment
I
if
have
things go
something
south.
to ask you.
She finally
he
looked at me,
began,
her eyes
and
red-rimmed.
I want you to know
I'm
that
still
your
legally
answer won't
authorized
change
to make
anything
those
between
decisions,
us if
at
you're
least
not
until
ready.
our would-have-been wedding date
Charlotte
when the
felt a
proxy
flutter of
expires.
apprehension.
But how do
What
I
is
know
it?
what's right?
Instead of
It was an
replying
impossible
immediately,
question,
Hollister
one I
retrieved
couldn't answer for her.
a small wooden box
What
from
would
his
Jason
desk
want?
drawer. When he
Chloe
opened it, nestled inside
considered
was a
this,
simple gold
twisting
band,
the empty ring finger on her
elegant
left
but
hand.
sturdy, much
He
like
always
the
said he
woman
wouldn't
it was
want to be
intended
kept
for.
alive by machines if
I
there was
know
no
we
hope.
agreed to take things
But he's
slowly,
only 36.
he said, his
There
voice
might be
steady,
hope, right?
but his eyes revealing
Before I could
his
respond,
vulnerability.
a surgeon
and I'll
in blue,
respect that if it's still
Scrubs
what you want.
approached.
But
Miss
seeing
Parker,
Sarah today
we've completed the first
made me
phase of
realize
surgery.
something important.
First phase of surgery. Chloe stood,
took a
gripping
deep
my
breath.
hand for support.
I don't
How
want
is
to
he?
waste any more time
We've
pretending we
stabilized the
don't
lung
both
and
know where
removed
this
the
is
damaged
heading.
portion of the spleen,
Charlotte stared.
the surgeon explained.
At the ring,
But the
a
head trauma
complex
is
mix of
concerning.
emotions
There's
washing
significant
through her.
swelling in the
Part
brain.
of her,
We're
the
inducing
part that had survived
a coma
by
to give it
avoiding
time to
attachments
heal.
and maintaining
And his prognosis?
absolute independence.
Chloe's voice was barely
recoiled
audible.
at the idea of marriage.
The next 24
of
hours are
binding herself
critical,
legally to
the
another
surgeon
person
said carefully.
after fighting
We
so
need your
hard
consent
for
for
her freedom.
additional procedures if
But another
necessary.
part,
Chloe Chloe signed the
1.
forms with
That
a
had
shaking
grown
hand,
stronger during
the
her
surgeon's
months in Silver
explanations
Peak,
washing over her.
recognized that true
When he left, she
freedom
turned to me with
wasn't
hollow
about
eyes.
avoiding connections.
I should call his
It was
parents.
about choosing
They
the
live in
right
Arizona.
ones on the
They
right
should be here.
terms.
That's a good idea. I
Before you
agree.
answer,
Is
Hollister
there
continued,
anyone else
reading
who
her
should know?
hesitation. I want
His
you
brother.
to know that this
And
wouldn't change who you are
I suppose
or what
Amber's
you
family,
do.
though I don't
I'm
have
not
their
asking you to
contact
become a
information.
traditional wife
We spent
or
the
to
next
give up
hour
your
making
business.
calls,
I'm
arranging
asking if you
flights
want
for
to
Jason's
build something
parents,
permanent
and providing
together
information
as
to various
equals.
family
Charlotte
members.
looked from the ring to
Throughout
the
it
man
all,
holding it.
Chloe
A
remained
man who had
remarkably
seen her at her
composed,
most vulnerable
though I could see the
and her
toll
most
it was taking on
formidable,
her.
who had never once
When we
asked her to
finally
be
had a
less
moment
than
of
she was.
quiet, I ventured a
I
question
can't
that
promise
had
to be
been
what most
bothering
people
me.
expect in a wife,
Chloe,
she said finally.
why did you come?
I'll still disappear into the
After what he
mountains when
did
I
to you,
need solitude.
many people
I'll
would have
still
told the
train
hospital to
riders,
contact
both
someone
men
else.
and women. I'll
She
still
was
speak
silent
my
for
mind,
so long, I
even
thought
when
she
it's
might not
inconvenient.
answer.
Hollister
Then,
smiled. I
because
wouldn't
I
have
know
it
what it's
any
like
other
to be
way.
alone in crisis.
Charlotte took the box from his hands,
She picked at a loose thread on
examining
her
the
sweater.
ring more closely.
3
It
years
wasn't
ago, I
ostentatious
was in a
like
car
something
accident.
Sarah might have worn,
Not as serious
but
as
neither
this,
was it
but
plain.
bad enough.
It was crafted
Jason
for
was
a woman
traveling for
who
work, and I
worked
had
with
no
her
family
hands,
nearby.
but still
A
appreciated
stranger stayed
beauty,
with me in the
much like the
ER until
life
my
they were
friend could
building in
arrive.
Silver Peak.
I never forgot
Yes,
that kindness.
she said simply, meeting
Her
his gaze
answer
with newfound
silenced me.
certainty. Yes,
Despite the betrayal she'd
I'll marry you,
experienced,
James
despite the
Hollister.
public
As he
humiliation
slipped
of
the ring
canceling a
onto her
wedding
finger,
days before the
Charlotte
event,
knew that this,
she chose
like every other
compassion over
choice she'd made
resentment
since
when it
finding
mattered
a
most.
wounded marshal in Rattlesnake
"You're a good
Canyon,
person, Chloe Parker,"
was not about
I said
becoming someone
finally.
new,
She
but
shook her
about
head.
finally being who she
"I'm not
truly
sure about
was.
that, but I'm
Charlotte
trying to be the
Morgan,
person I'd want
mail
to
service
encounter if
expert,
our positions were
frontier
reversed.
businesswoman, and soon,
That's the
wife on
definition
her
of a
own
good
terms,
person in my book.
the final piece of a life built
nurse
through courage,
appeared to
integrity,
inform us that
and
we
the
could see
freedom
Jason
to chart her
briefly.
own course
Chloe
across
hesitated,
the wild territory
then asked
of
if I would come with
possibility.
her.
Up
I
next,
agreed,
you've
following
got
her
two
down
more
the sterile
standout
hallway to the
stories right on your
ICU.
screen. If this one
Nothing
hit the
prepares
mark,
you for
you
seeing
won't want to
someone in
pass
a
these
medically
up. Just
induced
click and check
coma.
them out. And
Jason
don't forget
lay
to subscribe
unnaturally still,
and turn on the notification
tubes and wires
bell
connecting
so you
him
don't
to
miss
various
any upload
machines,
from us.
his face
Spring
swollen and
arrived in
bruised
Silver
almost
Peak
beyond
with a
recognition.
vigor that transformed
Beside
the
me,
landscape almost
Chloe
overnight.
drew in a sharp breath.
Snowmelt swelled the mountain
"I'll give
streams.
you a moment," I
Wildflowers
whispered,
erupted across the
stepping
valley
back
floor,
toward the door.
and the town itself
"No,"
seemed to shake off
she said
winter's
quickly.
stillness, embracing
stay."
the season of renewal.
She approached the
For
bed
Charlotte and
cautiously,
Hollister,
as if
spring
afraid to
brought
disturb the
culmination
equipment.
of plans,
After a
months in
moment's
the making.
hesitation,
Their
she
wedding,
reached out to touch
scheduled for the
Jason's
first
hand,
weekend in
the
May,
one without the
had
IV
become
line.
something of a town event.
"We had everything
not because
planned,"
either of
she
them
said
sought
softly,
attention,
not
but because
looking at
Silver
me.
Peak
"The
had
honeymoon in
embraced them as
Bali, the
symbols
house
of
we
the
were buying,
community's growth
the
and
5-year
future.
plan to start a family once we
I
were
never
established."
thought I'd
She
see
withdrew
the day,
her hand.
remarked Eleanor
"Now I don't
Wilson,
even know if
the
he'll wake
assayer's
up,
wife
and I'm not sure
Charlotte's
how I feel about
unexpected
any of
friend,
it.
as they
You don't
finalized
have to
arrangements in the
know
town's
right
newly
now,"
completed
I
meeting
told her.
hall.
"You just
Charlotte
have to be here,
Morgan
making
in a
the best
wedding
decisions
dress.
you can with the information
Charlotte
available.
smiled wryly,
The feelings will sort
adjusting a
themselves
vase of
out."
mountain wildflowers.
We stayed for
It's
only
not
a few
exactly
minutes
a
before the nurse
traditional
indicated
gown,
it was time
she
to
pointed
leave.
out.
In the
The
hallway,
dress
Chloe
in
suddenly
question,
stopped and
hanging
turned to me.
nearby, was practical
"Amber's room
ivory
is down
linen,
there," she
rather
said,
than elaborate
nodding toward
satin,
another corridor.
with a design
"I should
that
check on
allowed
her
freedom
too,
of
shouldn't I?
movement and
That's
didn't
what a good
require
person
a
would do."
corset. And
The
I'm
question
still
wasn't
wearing
really
my boots
directed at me,
underneath.
but I answered
Eleanor
anyway.
laughed. Of course
"Only
you are.
if you
I
feel
wouldn't
ready for
expect
that.
anything less.
Being a good person doesn't mean
The
putting
easy
yourself
friendship
through
between the two
unnecessary
women
pain."
had surprised Charlotte
Chloe
most of
considered
all.
this, then squared
Eleanor,
her shoulders.
with her Eastern education
"I want to
and
see her."
refined manners,
Unlike
seemed an
Jason,
unlikely
Amber was
companion
conscious,
for a
though
former
clearly
mail carrier
medicated.
who still occasionally
When she saw
disappeared
Chloe in the
into
doorway,
mountains
her
for
eyes
days at a
widened with
time.
fear and
Yet
shame.
beneath Eleanor's proper
"You can wait
exterior
outside if you
lurked
want,"
a sharp mind
Chloe told me.
and adventurous
"Are
spirit
you sure?"
that had found
She nodded.
limited expression
"I
in
need to do
frontier
this part
society.
alone."
In
I
Charlotte,
waited in the
she had
hall,
discovered
unable
both a
to hear
friend
their
who respected her
conversation,
intelligence
but watching through
and
the
a window
as
into
Chloe
freedoms she
spoke briefly
had
to
never
her former
permitted
friend.
herself.
The exchange
Any
lasted
word
only a
about
few
Sarah?
minutes before Chloe
Eleanor
emerged,
asked more quietly,
her expression
glancing
unreadable.
toward the door to ensure
"Did
they
you get
weren't
what you
overheard.
needed?" I asked
Charlotte's
as we walked
expression
back to
turned
the waiting
serious.
area.
Nothing
"I think so."
since she left town.
She didn't elaborate,
James
and I
contacted
didn't
marshals
press.
in Denver and
Jason's
San Francisco,
parents would arrive
but she seems to
early
have
the
vanished
next morning.
completely. And the warning
After
she
making
gave
sure Chloe had
about
everything she
Blackwell's
needed,
associates,
a place to
nothing nothing
day.
there either,
Transportation,
Charlotte
food.
sighed,
I
which
prepared
makes
to
me
leave.
more uneasy, not
Thank you,
less. If
she
it
said
was
as we
just an
stood in
empty
the hospital
threat,
parking
why
lot.
make it at all?
For coming, for
Before
staying,
Eleanor could
for not
respond,
judging me.
the door opened to admit
There's nothing
Hollister
to judge,
himself,
I assured
looking
her.
uncharacteristically
What you did
flustered.
tonight took incredible
"Charlotte,"
strength.
he said, barely
She shook her
acknowledging
head.
Eleanor's presence.
It still
"We have a
hurts so much.
situation."
Seeing
Charlotte
them,
immediately set
thinking about
aside
what
the
they
flowers
did.
she'd been arranging.
But somehow,
"What's
being
happened?"
here, Making these
Telegram
decisions,
from Fort Laramie.
it's helping
he
me let
explained,
go.
handing her the
Does
yellow
that make
paper.
sense?
Colonel
Perfect
Richards
sense,
sent a
I
warning.
replied,
3
thinking
former
of my
members
own
of the
journey on my
Blackwell
birthday,
gang escaped
how the
custody
fear of
during
losing
prisoner
Daniel
transfer.
had
They were
ultimately
last
led to
seen
a
heading
deeper
in this
appreciation
direction.
for what we had. Different
Charlotte scanned the
circumstances, but
telegram,
similar lessons.
her mind already shifting from wedding
As
preparations
I drove home,
to
I
security
found myself
considerations.
reflecting on the strange
Williams,
connection
Donovan,
that had
and
formed
Carter,
between
she
Chloe
read
and me.
aloud. I
A
remember
misunderstanding
them. They
had
were
brought
at
us
North
together
Ridge
initially,
Pass, part of
but something
Blackwell's inner
deeper
circle.
had developed.
They're
A
dangerous,
recognition of
Hollister
shared
confirmed
humanity in
grimly.
difficult moments.
And they have personal
Daniel was
reason
waiting
to
up
seek
despite my
revenge
earlier
against
instruction,
both of
relief
us.
washing over his
Eleanor
face when I
looked
walked
between
through the
them,
door.
concern etched on her face.
How did
the
it
wedding
go? He
proceeds
asked,
as planned,
pulling me into a
Charlotte
hug.
stated firmly.
Intense,
We're not letting
I admitted,
Blackwell's ghost
sinking
disrupt our lives
onto the
any
couch
further.
beside him.
She turned
Jason's
to Hollister.
condition is
But
serious.
we take precautions.
Chloe handled it
Quietly.
with incredible grace.
He nodded,
And how are you?
unsurprised by her response.
His concern was
It was
evident.
one of the things he loved most
This
about
can't
her.
have been easy,
Her refusal to be
especially
intimidated,
with everything we've got going
balanced
on.
by practical caution.
I thought about the embryo
I've already
transfer
sent riders
scheduled
to
for
watch
next
the main approaches
week.
to town.
The possibility
if they're
of multiples,
coming, we'll have
the
warning.
life-changing journey we were embarking
The
on.
next 3 days
Compared
passed
to what
in a
Chloe was
strange
facing,
juxtaposition
making
of wedding
life or death
preparations
decisions
and
for the man who had
security
betrayed
measures.
her,
While
our
Charlotte
challenges felt
finalized
manageable,
arrangements with the minister
even
and
blessed.
selected flowers with
I'm
Eleanor,
good, I said,
Hollister
meaning
organized
it.
the town's capable
Better
men
than good,
into
actually.
patrol groups
Being there
and
tonight,
established emergency
put things
protocols.
in perspective.
Neither spoke of postponement,
Daniel nodded,
though the
understanding
option hung
without needing further
unacknowledged
explanation.
between them. On the
Life can
evening
change
before the
in an
wedding,
instant.
Charlotte found herself
Which is why
alone
we
in
shouldn't
her
wait to
small
start apartment
cabin
hunting,
for the last
I
time.
added,
Tomorrow,
surprising myself with
she
the
would
decision.
move into the larger house
I don't want to
she
jinx
and Hollister
anything,
had purchased
but I also
together
don't want to waste
at
time
the
being
edge
afraid
town,
of disappointment.
A home
His
with
eyes
room
lit
for
up.
both privacy
Really?
and togetherness.
Really?
Designed
I
with their
curled into
unique
his side,
partnership in
suddenly
mind.
exhausted, but
As
content.
she packed the last of her
Let's
belongings,
embrace all the possibilities,
Charlotte's hand
scary
fell on
as
a
they
battered wooden
might
box
be.
pushed to the back of her dresser
As Daniel
drawer.
held me,
Inside
I thought again
lay
of
the
Chloe
remnants
standing
of
beside
Charlie
Jason's
Morgan,
hospital
the
bed,
breast bindings,
confronting a
the
future
masculine
nothing like the one
attire,
she'd planned.
the forged identification
Her courage in the
papers
face of
that
that
had
uncertainty
sustained her
was a powerful
disguise for
reminder.
3 years.
None of
She
us know
hadn't
what
touched
tomorrow
these
holds,
items since
but we can
arriving
choose
in
how we
Silver
face
Peak.
it. With
But
fear
neither
or with
had she
hope,
discarded
with
them.
resentment
They
or
represented
with
a chapter
grace.
of her life that,
I
while
was choosing
closed,
hope.
had shaped her into
And
the
after
woman
witnessing
she
Chloe's
now was.
strength
Every
tonight,
skill,
I was more
every
certain than
hard-won
ever that it was
lesson
the
from
right
those
choice.
years
Ever that it
had
was the right
proven
choice.
valuable in
I
building
know.
her new life.
He covered my hand with his.
A soft knock.
But whatever
at the
happens,
Luca
we face it
interrupted
together.
her reflection. Charlotte
phone
quickly
buzzed
closed
with
the
a
box
text
and returned
message.
it to the drawer before
Expecting
answering.
Olivia, I was
Hollister
surprised
stood
to
on
see
her
Chloe's
porch,
name on the
a
screen.
serious expression on his face.
Jason woke up this morning.
May I
Doctors
come
are
in?
cautiously
Of
optimistic.
course. She stepped aside,
Thought you'd want to
noting
know.
the tension in his shoulders.
Good news about
What's
Jason,
wrong?
I told
He
Daniel, showing
entered
him the
but remained
message.
standing,
In the
as if
week
too
since the
preoccupied
accident,
to
I'd been
settle.
checking in with Chloe regularly,
Riders spotted 3
offering
men
support as she
making
navigated
camp
the
in
complex
foothills
situation
about
with her
5 miles north of
ex-fiancé.
town. The
That's a
description
relief,
matches our
Daniel
fugitives.
said.
Charlotte
Are you going to
absorbed
visit them
this
again?
information with outward
I had
calm,
gone to the hospital
though her pulse
twice
quickened.
more since that
How
first
likely
night.
is it they're here
Once
for us
to meet Jason's
specifically?
parents, who were
Very,
quietly grateful for
Hollister
Chloe's
replied.
presence despite the
According
canceled
to
wedding.
Richard's report,
And again
they
when
spoke
Amber was discharged,
openly about revenge
needing a
while in
ride since her
custody.
family lived out of
Apparently,
state.
Williams lost a brother in the
Maybe
North Ridge
tomorrow,
ambush.
I decided.
So they're here.
Today,
on
I
the
just
eve
want to
of
go
our
home
wedding,
and rest.
Charlotte summarized.
The next 2
The
weeks
timing
stretched into
seems
what felt like an eternity.
deliberate.
I returned
Hollister
to
nodded
work,
grimly.
trying to focus on
Sarah
normal
could
activities
have
while hyper-aware
informed
of
them,
every
or they
twinge and
could have
sensation in
contacts
my
in town who sent
body.
word. Charlotte
Was that
considered
cramp
their options,
implantation
moving
or
to the
just
window
digestive
to gaze
discomfort?
out at the quiet street.
Was my fatigue
Silver
pregnancy
Peak
or
was
anxiety?
vulnerable. A growing
Every day was a
settlement
new
with limited
exercise
law
in
enforcement
restraint,
resources,
stopping myself from
populated
taking an
largely
early
by
home
families
pregnancy
and
test
business
that
people
might give
rather
false
than
results.
gunfighters. If determined
Daniel
outlaws
was
launched an
my
attack,
rock,
innocent
distracting
people
me
could
with
be caught in the
apartment viewings,
crossfire.
cooking
We need
special
to draw
meals,
them away from
and never
town,
once
she
betraying his own
concluded.
anxiety,
Make them come
though
to
I knew
us
he felt
on
it
our
too.
terms, away from
10 days into
civilians.
the wait, Olivia
I've been
called with her
thinking
own
the same.
news.
Hollister
I'm officially on the
agreed,
schedule,
but
she
how?
announced.
They'll be
Donor
suspicious
selected,
of any
treatment Treatment
obvious
protocol
trap.
approved.
Charlotte turned
I start
from the
hormones
window,
next.
a plan
Month.
already forming.
That's
Not
fantastic,
if it's
Liv.
believable.
Have you
Not
told
if it's
anyone
something
else?
they'd expect us to
Just
do.
my parents.
Her
My mom
eyes
is
met
thrilled.
his.
She's
What would
been
a
desperate
marshal
for
and his bride
grandchildren.
do the night
My
before
dad's
their
taking a
wedding
bit longer
if
to
they
adjust
learned
to the idea,
dangerous
but
men
he'll
were
come
nearby?
around. And how are you
Understanding
feeling
dawned
about
on Hollister's
everything?
face.
She
Flee,
paused. scared,
Postpone the wedding
excited,
and seek
suddenly
safety
aware that my
elsewhere.
apartment has sharp corners and no
Exactly,
childproofing.
Charlotte nodded.
She laughed,
We make
then
it known
sobered.
that we've left
But
town
mostly grateful that I
temporarily,
have you to talk to
provide
about
a clear
all of
trail
this.
to follow,
Your
and
journey
choose
gave
the
me the
ground
courage
for
to start my
confrontation
own.
ourselves.
Her words touched me
It's
deeply.
dangerous, Hollister
We'll figure
warned,
it out together,
though she could
whatever
see he was
happens.
already evaluating the
Speaking of
strategy.
which, any
If they
symptoms yet?
catch us
She
on the
asked
trail,
cautiously.
they won't,
Nothing
Charlotte
definitive,
interrupted with
I
quiet
admitted.
confidence. Remember
Some
who
fatigue,
you're marrying,
a little nausea
James.
this morning,
No
but that
one
could be
knows
nerves.
these mountains
The
better
blood
than I
test
do.
is in 4 days. I'll
His
be thinking of
expression
you,
softened
she
slightly,
promised.
pride
And
mixing
Megan?
with concern.
Thank you for
I haven't
supporting me through
forgotten,
this.
But we'd be
After
deliberately
we hung
riding
up,
toward men
I found
who want
myself
us
reflecting
dead.
on how much had changed since my
Better
birthday
us than
just a month
innocent
ago.
townspeople,
The day
she
I
countered.
thought was the
This
end of
is
my
our
marriage had
fight,
instead
not
become a new
theirs.
beginning. Not
For a
just for
moment,
Daniel and me,
Hollister
but
looked
for
as if he
Olivia
might
too,
argue further.
and in an
Then his
unexpected way,
shoulders straightened,
for Chloe
resolution
as she rebuilt her
replacing
life.
doubt. You're right.
That
We end
afternoon,
this
I received
now,
another text
before
from
anyone
Chloe.
else gets hurt because of Blackwell's
Jason's being
vendetta. Within
discharged
an hour,
tomorrow.
word had
His parents
spread
are taking
through
him back to
Silver
Arizona
Peak
for
that
recovery.
The wedding was postponed.
Would you want to meet for coffee
The
before I
story,
head back to work
carefully
next week?
leaked through strategic
We
conversations
arranged to meet
with
at a
key
small cafe
townspeople
near my office the
was
following day.
that Charlotte and
When I
Hollister
arrived,
had received
Chloe was already
warning
there,
of approaching
looking
danger
more
and had
rested than when
departed
I'd
for
last
Fort
seen her
Laramie
at the hospital,
to seek assistance,
though still carrying
planning
tension
to
in her
return
shoulders.
when the threat
Thank you
was
for coming,
neutralized.
she said as I joined
In
her.
reality,
I
as
wanted to
darkness
see you
fell,
before everything
they
goes back
slipped
to
out of town by a
whatever
seldom
normal is
used
now.
trail,
How are
heading
you
not
holding
east
up?
toward Fort
I
Laramie,
asked,
but
accepting the
north,
latte
into
she'd
the
already
higher
ordered for
elevations
me.
Charlotte knew
Better
intimately.
than expected.
Their destination was
She
the
twisted
abandoned mining
a
claim
napkin
she had
between her
discovered during
fingers.
her mail carrier days.
Jason's parents
a
have been
defensible
surprisingly
position
kind
with
to me,
clear sight
considering
lines
everything.
and multiple escape routes.
His mother actually thanked
They
me for
traveled
being
light,
there those
but
first
well
crucial
armed,
days.
moving swiftly
That
through
couldn't
terrain
have been easy
that
for
would
any of you.
have challenged
It
less
wasn't,
experienced
but it
riders.
was healing
Charlotte
in a
led
strange
the
way.
navigating
looked up,
by moonlight
meeting my
and
eyes
memory,
directly.
while Hollister watched their
I got
back
to say
trail
goodbye
for signs
properly
of pursuit.
to the relationship, to the
By
future we
midnight,
planned,
they had reached
to the
their
hurt and
destination,
anger I've been carrying.
a small plateau,
Amber?
sheltered by
That's more
towering
complicated.
pines.
We
with
talked
a
briefly
dilapidated
before she was
cabin that had once
discharged.
housed hopeful
She apologized,
miners. The
cried a
claim
lot.
had failed,
Chloe
but the
shrugged.
location offered
I don't
natural
think we'll ever be
advantages for
friends
their
again,
purpose.
but I don't
We
actively
should
wish her
rest in
ill anymore,
shifts,
which is
Hollister
progress.
suggested, as they secured their
Definitely
horses behind
progress.
the cabin,
I
out
agreed.
of sight from the trail.
What about you?
They won't attempt the
She
mountain
asked,
paths
changing the
in
subject.
darkness, but
Any
they'll
news
start
on
at
the
first light if
baby
they took our
situation?
bait. Charlotte
She
nodded,
gestured
checking
vaguely
her rifle one
toward my
final time
midsection.
before setting it
Not
within
yet.
easy reach.
The definitive
I'll take
test is
first
in
watch.
3 days.
You need to rest that
I
shoulder.
hesitated,
She'd
then
noticed him
decided to
favoring
confide
his
in
old
her.
wound during their
This
ride.
morning, I
Though
thought
he
I
hadn't
felt different,
complained, Hollister
but I've been
didn't
fooled by
argue,
symptoms
recognizing
before.
the practicality
Chloe
of her
nodded
suggestion.
sympathetically.
As he settled on
mind
the
is
cabin's
powerful.
worn wooden floor,
When I was planning
using
the
his
wedding,
saddle as a
I
pillow,
convinced myself
he
I had
reached
food poisoning
for
from
her
the
hand.
stress.
Not
Turned out
exactly
it was just
the wedding
anxiety.
night we planned, despite
Exactly.
the tension of their
And
situation.
with potentially twins
Charlotte
at stake,
smiled.
I'm
I
trying
don't
not to
know.
get
Camping
my
in the
hopes too high.
mountains, outwitting
Twins?
outlaws.
Her
Seems
eyes
fitting
widened.
for us, don't you think?
That would be
He
quite the
chuckled
plot
softly,
twist.
his thumb
My
brushing
life
across
seems
her
to
knuckles.
specialize in
when
those
this
lately.
Is over,
I laughed.
When this is over,
We
she
chatted for
finished
another
him.
hour,
We get
moving
married,
from fertility
as
treatments
planned.
to Chloe's work,
Blackwell's men
my
don't
job,
get to take that from
and
us.
eventually to the lake
The
house
night
that had
passed
inadvertently
quietly.
brought us into each other's lives.
Charlotte kept.
I finally
Watch until
closed
the
on my
moon
own
had
place,
traversed half
she
the sky.
mentioned.
Then
Not on the
woke
lake,
Hollister to
but a
take
small
his
cabin
turn.
in the mountains.
She slept lightly.
Somewhere I can go to
Years of
clear my
trail
head when the city
vigilance
gets
having trained her
overwhelming.
to remain partially
That
alert,
sounds perfect.
even in rest.
As we prepared to
Dawn broke
leave,
clear
Chloe
and
handed me a
cold.
small
The mountain air
gift
crisp
bag.
with pine scent
I
and
got you
possibility.
something. A thank
They
you for
shared a
being there
simple
when you had
breakfast of jerky
absolutely
and
no
hard
obligation
biscuits,
to be.
Then positioned themselves
Inside was a
strategically.
delicate silver
Charlotte
bracelet
at the rear
with a
of the
small
cabin,
charm in the
where she
shape
could
of a
cover
lotus
both
flower.
the main approach
It's
and their
beautiful,
escape route if needed.
I said, genuinely
Hollister at the
touched.
front, with a
But
clear
you didn't
view
need
of the
to.
trail.
I wanted to,
When they come,
she interrupted.
Charlotte said as they
The
finished
lotus
their
grows in mud,
preparations. We
yet
tried to take
emerges
them
clean and
alive,
beautiful.
if possible.
It reminded me of how
Hollister
something good
raised
can
an
come from
eyebrow.
difficult circumstances.
They won't extend us the
She
same courtesy.
smiled ruefully.
No, she agreed.
Like a
But
friendship friendship
we're not
formed
them.
because I was mistaken
Justice,
for your
not
husband's
vengeance.
mistress.
Isn't that what you
I
taught
laughed
me?
at her directness.
A smile
When you
touched
put
his
it that
lips.
way,
Using my own
We
principles
parted with a
against
hug
me,
that felt
Charlotte
natural
Morgan,
despite our unusual
soon
connection,
to be Charlotte
promising
Hollister,
to stay
she
in
corrected,
touch regardless of where
enjoying the way
life
the
took us
name
next.
felt on her tongue,
That evening,
despite their
I showed
precarious
Daniel the bracelet,
circumstances.
explaining
And
its
yes,
significance.
absolutely,
The lotus
they
metaphor is apt,
settled into
he
watchful
observed,
waiting as
examining
the
the
sun
charm.
climbed higher,
Though I'm still a bit
painting the
amazed that you and
mountainside
Chloe
in
have
golden
become
light.
friends after how you first
Birds
met.
resumed their morning
Life
songs,
is strange that way,
and a gentle
I
breeze
mused.
stirred the pine
My
branches.
birthday crisis
It was
led
the
to
kind
Olivia
of day that
deciding to
reminded
pursue
Charlotte why she had fallen
motherhood,
in love
to
with
us
this
finding
rugged
out
country.
about the possibility
Its
of
harsh
twins,
beauty, its
to a friendship with
uncompromising
someone I
honesty,
initially thought
its
was having an
capacity
affair
for
with
both
my
danger
husband.
and
Daniel
peace.
pulled me close.
The first
Just 3
sign
more
of
days
approach
until
came
we know
just
for
after
sure
9
about the
o'clock.
pregnancy.
The distant
3
sound
more
of
days,
horses
I
laboring
echoed,
up the steep
trying
trail,
to keep my
still out of
expectations
sight,
measured.
but unmistakably
But that
drawing
night, as
closer.
I lay in bed,
3
hand resting
riders,
gently on my abdomen,
Hollister confirmed
I
after
allowed
listening
myself to feel a
intently.
flicker of
Moving
genuine hope.
cautiously, Charlotte
Not just for a
positioned herself
positive
behind a
pregnancy
stack
test,
of weathered
but for
mining
all the new
equipment,
beginnings
her
taking
rifle
shape
steady
around
in her
me,
hands.
Olivia's
Remember
journey,
the plan.
Chloe's fresh start,
We issue
and my
one
own evolving
warning.
story
If
with
they
Daniel.
draw, we have no choice.
Whatever the test
Hollister
revealed,
nodded grimly
I
from
knew
his
that my
position near the
35th
cabin's
birthday
front
had
window.
marked
The
a
minutes
turning point.
stretched as the sounds grew louder.
What had begun in
Then
fear
finally,
and
the first
misunderstanding had
rider
somehow
appeared around the
blossomed
bend
into
in the
deeper
trail.
connections and new
Charlotte
possibilities.
recognized Williams
A lotus emerging
immediately.
from the mud,
A tall,
reaching
gaunt
toward the
man
light.
with a scar bisecting his
light.
left cheek.
The day of the
Behind
embryo
him came
transfer
Donovan,
arrived with a mix of
stocky and
sunshine and
red-bearded,
scattered clouds,
and finally Carter,
weather that matched
the
my
youngest
emotional
of the
state
3,
perfectly.
but perhaps the most dangerous,
Hope bright
with
as
the
the
cold
sunlight,
eyes of a man who
caution
killed
hovering
without
like
hesitation.
the clouds. Daniel
They
and I
halted
arrived
their
at the
horses
fertility
about
clinic
50
an
yards
hour
from the
early,
cabin,
too anxious to
studying
sit
the
at home
seemingly
waiting.
deserted structure
3
with
times is the
suspicious
charm,
eyes. This don't
Daniel
feel
said,
right, Donovan
squeezing my
muttered, just
hand
loud
as we
enough for
checked in at the
Charlotte to
reception
hear
desk.
in the clear mountain air.
This was our 3rd
Why would
attempt at
they stop
implantation
here?
after 2 previous
Tired
failures.
horses, Williams
Let's hope
reasoned.
so,
They
I
pushed
replied,
hard getting out of
trying
town.
to keep my voice steady
Probably
despite
thought
the
they'd lost
butterflies
us. Carter
in my stomach.
said nothing, but
The
his
waiting
hand
room was
hovered
softly
near his
lit with
holstered
comfortable
revolver
chairs and
as his
soothing
gaze
artwork
swept the surrounding
designed
trees
to
and
calm
rocks,
anxious patients
instinctively
like us.
searching for danger.
As we settled in,
Marshal
I noticed
Hollister,
a familiar figure seated across
Williams
the room,
called out suddenly.
head bent over a magazine.
We know you're in there.
Olivia?
You and
I
your
called
mail.
softly.
Carrier bride.
She looked up,
Silence
surprise
answered him.
and then
The
embarrassment
outlaws
crossing her
exchanged
features.
glances. Then Williams
Megan,
nodded to the
Daniel,
others. They
I didn't
dismounted,
expect to see
tethering
you
their
here
horses
today.
to a
We
nearby pine and
moved to
spread
sit
out as
beside
they
her.
approached the cabin.
My transfer is
Professional
scheduled for
killers,
10,
taking
I
no
explained.
chances.
What are you doing
When
here?
they were 30 yards away,
Olivia hesitated,
Hollister's voice
glancing
rang
between
out,
us.
calm and authoritative. That's
I decided
far
to go
enough.
through with it.
Williams,
My
all
initial
of you are
consultation
wanted
is this
men.
morning.
Throw down your weapons
Joy burst
and you'll
through
be
me.
taken back to Fort
That's
Laramie
wonderful.
alive.
I didn't
The
know you'd made
outlaws
up your
froze,
mind.
then dove for
It wasn't
cover
easy,
behind rocks and
she
trees
admitted.
as they drew their guns.
After our conversation at
Come
your
out
birthday,
and face us,
I did a lot
Hollister,
of thinking.
Williams shouted.
Talked to some single
back.
mothers by
You
choice.
killed Jed Blackwell
Did
and my
research.
brother. We're here to
She
return
smiled,
the favor.
slightly.
Last chance.
Then
Charlotte
I
called
realized
from her
I was
position,
doing all the
revealing
things
to the
someone does
outlaws
when
that
they've
they were
already
caught
made
in a
their decision,
crossfire.
but need to feel
Surrender now.
justified.
Donovan fired
Daniel gave her an
blindly in
encouraging
direction,
nod.
the bullet splintering
That's how we
wood
felt
several
when we
feet
first
from where
started
she
this
actually
journey.
crouched.
Researching
Charlotte sighted
obsessively,
carefully
even though
and
we'd already
squeezed her
decided.
trigger.
A nurse
The rifle
appeared in the
cracked,
doorway.
and Donovan howled
Megan
as
Warren,
the bullet
we're
tore
ready
through
for
his
you.
gun hand,
My
sending
heart
his
leapt
weapon
into my
spinning
throat.
away. The
This
battle
was it.
erupted in earnest then.
Good luck,
Muzzle
Olivia
flashes
said,
and gun
hugging me
smoke
tightly.
were sharp. Reports
I'll
of
be sending all
firearms
the
echoing
positive
off the
thoughts I can
mountainside.
muster.
Carter proved himself
The procedure
the most
itself
dangerous.
was quick and
His
relatively
accuracy
painless,
forcing both Charlotte and Hollister
anticlimactic
to keep
given
their
the years
heads
of
down
treatments,
as he
tests,
provided covering
and
fire for
disappointments that
Williams
had
to
led to
advance
this
on the
moment.
cabin.
Dr. Chen
Charlotte
worked with
realized
focused
their
efficiency,
strategy
explaining
too late.
each step as the
While
carefully
Carter
selected
kept them
embryos
pinned
were
down,
transferred.
Williams had
As we
circled behind the
discussed,
structure,
she said as she
approaching
finished,
her position
we've
from the
transferred
blind
2
side.
high-quality
She heard
embryos.
a bootful behind her
Based
and
on your
spun
hormone
just as
levels
Williams
and the embryo
lunged,
quality,
tackling
there's
her
approximately a
sideways and sending her
60%
rifle
chance of at
clattering
least
across the
one
rocks.
implanting
They
successfully,
grappled fiercely,
and about a 30%
Williams's
chance that
superior
both
size
will.
and strength
And
nearly
if both
overwhelming
implant?
her.
Daniel
Charlotte
asked,
fought.
holding my
With
hand
every
tightly.
trick she'd learned
Then you'll
during
be having
years
twins,
of
she
surviving
replied with a
alone in
smile.
hostile territory.
We'll know more in about 2
targeting
weeks when we
vulnerable
can perform the
points,
first
using
blood test for
leverage
pregnancy
instead
hormones.
of force,
2
remaining
weeks.
calm
The
when
infamous
panic would mean
2-week
death.
wait that every
She
woman in
managed to
fertility
drive her
treatment
knee
dreaded.
into Williams's
That
midsection,
limbo between
creating
potential
enough
and
space to
certainty,
reach the knife
hope and
sheathed at her
knowledge.
belt. The
For
blade
now,
flashed as
Dr.
she
Chen
slashed outward,
continued,
opening a shallow
regular
cut across his
activity is
forearm.
fine. but avoid
Williams
strenuous
jerked back,
exercise,
cursing,
hot
and Charlotte
baths,
scrambled
and try to
to her
minimize
feet.
stress.
"You killed my
She
brother,"
gave me a knowing look.
Williams snarled,
I know that
circling her
last part
warily
is easier
now,
said than
his own
done.
knife drawn.
As we left the
"Maid,
clinic,
a
we passed
fool of
Olivia
Blackwell,
still waiting for her
destroyed
appointment.
everything we built.
She
Your
gave us a
brother
thumbs
chose
up,
his
mouthing,
path,"
"Call
Charlotte
me
replied,
later,"
her
as we
breath
headed for
coming
the
hard,
elevator.
but her voice steady.
In the car,
"Just
Daniel
as you
turned to me
chose
before
yours."
starting the engine.
With a roar of
"How do you
rage,
feel?
Williams charged
Physically?
again.
Fine.
This time,
Emotionally?
Charlotte sidest.
Like I'm balancing on a tightrope.
With a roar
I placed
of
my
rage,
hand
Williams
gently
charged
on my
again.
abdomen,
This
trying to
time,
connect with the
Charlotte
microscopic
sidestepped at the
embryos
last
now
moment,
hopefully
using his
finding their way
momentum
to
against him.
implant.
As he stumbled
I
past,
want to be optimistic,
she delivered a
but I'm
precise
scared.
strike to the back of his knee,
Scared.
sending
They
him
said late
crashing to the
afternoon,
ground.
I reminded
Before he
Daniel
could
for
recover,
perhaps the 10th
Charlotte
time.
was on him, pressing
That
her
could
knife
mean any
against
time
his
between
throat.
now and 6.
"It's over, Williams," she
Why
said,
don't we sit on
her
the
voice
dock?
calm
He
despite the
suggested.
thunder of her heart.
It's your favorite
"Drop
spot."
the knife." For
The
a
wooden
moment,
dock extended
hatred
30 feet
blazed
into
in
the
his
lake,
eyes, and
ending
Charlotte
with a
thought
small
he might
seating
force her
area where
hand.
we'd spent countless
Then,
hours
with a
watching
curse of
sunsets,
defeat, he
discussing
released
our
his weapon
dreams,
from
processing
the front of the
disappointments.
cabin came
Today,
two more
it felt like the
gunshots in
perfect
quick
place to
succession,
receive news that
followed
would
by
shape our
silence.
future.
Charlotte
We sat
tensed,
side by
fearing
side,
the worst, until
feet
Hollister's
dangling above
voice
the
called
water,
out,
hands
"Charlotte,
intertwined
you all
between
right?"
us. My phone rested
"I'm
on my
fine,"
lap. Screen
she
up,
responded,
volume at
quickly binding
maximum so we
Williams's
wouldn't
hands
miss
with a leather
the
strap from
call.
her belt.
"Whatever
"Doc
happens,"
Williams, you?"
Daniel said quietly.
"Carter's down,"
"We'll face it together."
Hollister replied,
I squeezed his
his
hand
voice
in
drawing
acknowledgement,
closer as he
too
circled the
emotional to
cabin.
speak.
Donovan surrendered.
At 4:43
When
p.m.,
Hollister appeared
my
around
phone
the
rang.
corner, rifle
Dr.
in hand,
Chen's name
Charlotte
lighting
felt
up the
a wave
screen.
of relief, so
My heart
intense
lurched as I
it nearly
answered,
buckled her
putting
knees.
it on speaker
His
so
shirt
Daniel
was
could hear.
torn, and there was a
"Hello?
graze along his cheekbone,
Megan,
but
it's
he was
Dr.
alive
Chen.
and whole. Their
I
eyes
have
met over the subdued
your
form
test
of Williams,
results."
and in that
I tightened
moment,
my grip on
everything
Daniel's
they'd
hand.
fought for, not
We're
just
both here
today,
listening.
but throughout their
There was a
journey
brief
together,
pause.
crystallized
Surely no more than a
into
second,
absolute
but it felt like an
clarity.
eternity.
This was what they did.
"Congratulations,"
who they were.
Dr. Chen
Partners who
said
faced
warmly.
danger unflinchingly,
"You're
who
pregnant."
protected others,
The words
who
hung in
stood
the
for
air
something
between us,
larger than
almost
themselves.
too enormous to comprehend.
Some wedding day,
Daniel's hand trembled
Hollister
in mine,
remarked,
or perhaps
a wry
mine
smile
in his.
touching his lips as he
"Really?"
helped secure
I
Williams.
finally managed, my voice
Charlotte
barely a whisper.
found herself laughing, the
"Really?"
sound startling in
she
the
confirmed.
aftermath of violence.
"Your
but
HCG
somehow
levels are
perfectly
quite
right.
high, which
I
is
don't
very
know.
promising.
I always did
Based on
prefer
the numbers,
action to ceremony.
there's a strong
By
possibility
midday,
that both
they had
embryos
all
have
3
implanted
prisoners
successfully."
secured, and were making their way
"Twins?"
back down the mountain
Daniel's
towards
voice
Silver
cracked
Peak.
on the word.
Word
"It's
of
too
their
early to
return
confirm
spread
through
quickly,
ultrasound,
and by the
but the
time they
hormone
reached
levels
the town
certainly
limits,
suggest that
a
possibility.
crowd had gathered.
We'll know more in a few
Concerned
weeks."
faces
The conversation
breaking
continued.
into relief,
Instructions
and
for
then
medications,
celebration as they
scheduling the
recognized
first
the returning
ultrasound,
party.
cautionary
The town's
advice
small
about the
jail
fragility of
had
early
never
pregnancy.
held 3 prisoners at once
But
before,
I was only half
but
listening,
accommodations were
stunned
quickly
by the
arranged.
reality that
Charlotte
after
and
years
Hollister
of trying,
provided a brief
of
account to the town
disappointment,
council,
of procedures and
explaining
injections
that the
and
threat had
tears,
been neutralized,
we were finally pregnant.
and arrangements would be made to transport
When the call
the
ended,
outlaws to Fort
Daniel and I
Laramie
sat
for
in
trial.
silence for several moments,
So,
letting the
Eleanor
news
Wilson
settle
asked
around
as
us
the
like the
meeting
golden afternoon
concluded,
light on the
voicing
lake.
what everyone was
"We
wondering.
did it,"
Does
he
this
said
mean
finally,
the wedding is
his
back
voice
on
thick
for
with
tomorrow?
emotion. "We
Charlotte
did
and
it,"
Hollister
I
exchanged
repeated,
glances,
tears spilling
communicating
freely now.
silently as they had
"We're
learned
having
to
a
do
baby.
through shared
Maybe
danger
2.
and quiet evenings.
Daniel pulled me
"No,"
into
Charlotte
his
answered
arms,
finally,
and we
"not
clung
tomorrow."
to each other on the
A
dock,
murmur of
laughing and
disappointment
crying
rippled through the
simultaneously,
gathered townspeople.
overwhelmed by
"Today,"
joy and fear
Hollister
and
continued,
relief,
taking
and a
Charlotte's
thousand
hand.
other
"If the
emotions
minister is
impossible to
available,
name.
we're getting
I
married
can't believe
today."
it, I
The
kept saying.
impromptu
After
wedding
everything,
came together
after all
with
this time,
remarkable speed.
after your
The
birthday
entire
disaster,
town mobilizing
Daniel
to
added
prepare
with a
the
small
meeting
laugh.
hall, arrange flowers,
"That wasn't a
and
disaster,"
assemble a
I
celebration
corrected him,
feast.
wiping
By sunset,
tears from my cheeks.
Charlotte found herself
It
standing
was a
before the
revelation.
town minister,
If
wearing
I
her practical
hadn't
ivory
found your
dress
ring,
and her
read that
trail
email,
boots as
come up here
planned,
looking for
her
you,
hair adorned with
you might never have
wildflowers
found the
gathered
birthday
by the
gift or my notes about
schoolchildren.
the fertility treatment," he
Hollister,
finished.
freshly
"We
shaved
might have
and
missed that
dressed in
perfect moment
his
of
best
alignment
suit,
where everything came
regarded
together."
her with barely
I
concealed
nodded,
wonder
resting my
as
head
she
on his
joined
shoulder
him at
as
the
we
altar.
looked
The bruise
out
on his
over the tranquil
cheekbone
lake.
from the morning's fight had darkened,
It's strange
but
to
his
think that one
eyes
of the
were
worst
bright with
days of my
certainty
life
and
turned into one
devotion.
of the best.
"Dearly beloved,"
Life's
the
funny
minister
that way,
began,
Daniel
his voice
mused.
carrying through the
The
crowded
things we
hall.
fear most
"We are
sometimes
gathered
lead
here
us
today
exactly where we
to
need to
join
go.
this man and
As
this
the sun
woman in
began its
holy
descent
matrimony,
toward the
a
horizon,
union
casting
forged
long
through
golden
extraordinary
reflections across the
circumstances
water,
and
we
tested
sat
by
wrapped in each
fire.
other's arms, contemplating the
traditional
journey that
words
had brought us
continued,
to this moment,
Charlotte
and
found
the one
herself
still
reflecting on the
unfolding
journey
before
that
us.
had brought them to this moment.
Impulsively,
From that first
I pulled out
encounter
my
in
phone
Rattlesnake
again.
Canyon, a
"Who are you
wounded
calling?"
marshal and a
Daniel
disguised
asked.
mail carrier,
Not calling.
both guarding their secrets,
Texting.
to this public
I showed him the
declaration
screen
of
where I'd
commitment,
opened a group
they had
message
traveled
to
a
Olivia
distance
and
measured
Chloe.
not just in miles,
Positive
but in
test.
trust,
Possibly
courage,
twins.
and transformation.
More
When
details
the time
soon, but
came
wanted
for
to
their
share the
vows,
news with the two
Hollister
people whose
spoke
lives
first,
got
his
tangled up
voice
in our
steady
story
and
in the
sure.
strangest ways.
Charlotte,
Thank you both for being
I
part of
take
this
you
journey.
as my wife,
Responses
my
came
partner,
almost immediately.
and my equal.
Olivia.
I promise to respect your
Screaming.
independence, even as we build a life
knew.
together. To value your
Calling
strength
you in
as
5
much
minutes
as your
when I stop
tenderness,
crying happy
and
tears.
to walk beside you, never ahead or behind,
Chloe.
through whatever challenges
Congratulations.
await us.
The universe works in mysterious
Tears pricked at
ways.
Charlotte's eyes.
So happy for you both.
Unexpected, but not
They were both
unwelcome.
there at crucial
when
moments.
her turn came,
I explained
the
to
words
Daniel.
rose from her
Olivia,
heart with
when I thought I'd
absolute
lost
certainty.
you. Chloe, when we found our way
James,
back to each
I
other.
take you as my
And now
husband,
they'll be part of
my
what comes
partner,
next,
and
he
my
said,
equal.
understanding
I promise
completely
to share with you
what
the
comes
freedom
next.
I fought so hard
The phrase
to achieve,
seemed to expand with
trust
possibility.
you with my truths,
Nursery
as well as my
preparations,
silences,
doctor appointments,
and to face
shopping
whatever
for
comes,
two of everything
be
if
it
the twin
danger
possibility
or
proved
joy,
true.
with the same
There
courage
would be
we
challenges
discovered
ahead,
together.
certainly. Pregnancy
The
was
simple
just the
gold
beginning of an
band
entirely
Hollister placed on her
new
finger
journey.
felt not like a shackle,
But
as
sitting
she
there
had
on the
once
dock
feared
with Daniel,
marriage
watching
would
the
be,
day gradually
but like
give way
a
to
freely
evening,
chosen bond,
I felt a profound
a symbol
sense of
commitment
readiness.
made stronger
The
because
path
it came
that had
from
led us
choice
here,
rather
winding
than
and
obligation.
unexpected as it had
As the
been,
minister
had
pronounced,
somehow
the
prepared us
husband
for
and
whatever
wife,
lay ahead.
the hall erupted in
My phone
cheers
buzzed
and
again with a
applause.
text from
Charlotte
Olivia.
and Hollister sealed
Can't wait
their
to be there
union
for all of
with a
it.
kiss
Auntie
that spoke
Liv
of
has a
both
nice
passion
ring
and
to it,
partnership.
don't
A promise
you think?
between equals who had chosen
I
each
smiled,
other above
thinking of the
all
parallel
others.
journeys we were now embarking on.
The celebration
Olivia
continued
pursuing
late
single
into the
motherhood
night,
by
the
choice.
entire town
Daniel and I
participating
finally
in the
expecting
joy
after years
that
of
seemed
trying.
all the sweeter
And even
for the
Chloe
danger that had
rebuilding her
preceded
life
it.
after
Charlotte
unexpected
and Hollister
betrayal.
received congratulations,
What are you thinking
shared
about?
dances,
Daniel
and
asked,
eventually slipped
noticing
away
my
to the
expression.
house that would now be
About
their
how
shared
different our
home.
lives looked a month ago,
Later,
I
as
replied.
moonlight spilled,
How one day,
through the
my
bedroom
birthday,
window,
changed
Charlotte lay
everything.
awake, listening
Not
to Hollister's
everything,
steady
he corrected
breathing
gently.
beside her. The events
changed
of
our
the day,
perspective,
the fight, the capture,
showed us
the
what
wedding,
really matters.
had exhausted him,
But the love
her
was
own
always
mind
there.
remained active,
The foundation
processing
solid.
the transition she
We
had
just needed to
made.
remember that.
She had gone from Charlotte
As twilight
Morgan,
settled over the
independent
lake,
mail
we
service
finally
trainer with a
rose from the
secret,
dock and
passed
walked hand
to
in
Charlotte
hand back to
Hollister,
the cabin,
wife of the town
now
marshal,
immersed in the
but still
blue
very much
glow of
her own
early
woman.
evening.
The name
Inside,
had changed,
Daniel built
but
up the
essence
fire while I
remained,
called my
perhaps
sister with
even
the news.
strengthened by having
Her
found
excited
a partner
squeals so
who saw
loud
and
that Daniel
valued her
could hear them
authentic
from
self.
across the room.
Carefully, so
Later,
as not to wake
curled
him,
together on the
Charlotte
sofa
slipped
watching
from
the
bed
flames
and moved
dance,
to the window.
I placed a
Silver
protective
Peak
hand
lay peaceful
over
below,
my still
a
flat
scattering
abdomen,
of lights marking
marveling
where
at the
celebrations
miracle
still
happening beneath my
continued,
palm.
or where
One embryo
families
or two,
prepared for
it
sleep.
didn't matter. What mattered was
Beyond
that
the
after
town
years of
stretched the
hoping,
vast
we were
wilderness
finally on
that
our
had
way
been
to
both
becoming
her
the family
refuge
we'd
and her
dreamed of.
challenge for so many
Happy unbirthday,
years.
Daniel
She felt
murmured,
Hollister stir
placing his
behind
hand
her,
over mine.
then his warm presence
What?
as he joined her at the
Well,
window,
your
wrapping
actual
his arms
birthday
around her waist.
was kind of a disaster until the end,
Regrets?
he explained
he
with a
asked
smile.
softly,
So
misreading
consider
her
this your
contemplative
unbirthday
mood.
celebration, the day we found out
Charlotte
we're going to be
leaned back
parents.
against him, secure
I like
in
that,
the knowledge
I
that
decided,
this closeness
nestling
was
closer
freely
to him.
chosen, not
A new
demanded.
tradition to mark a new
None,
beginning.
she assured him.
Outside,
Just thinking
night
about
had
how
fully
far
claimed
we've
the
come,
lake,
how
stars
far
reflecting
I've come.
in its dark
From
surface
Charlie
like
Morgan
scattered
to Charlotte
diamonds.
Hollister, he observed,
Inside,
his breath
wrapped
warm
in
against
Daniel's
her hair.
arms with the fire
No,
warming our
she
faces,
corrected gently.
I felt a
From
profound
hiding
sense
who
of
I
homecoming.
was to embracing
Not just
it.
to this place
From
we loved,
surviving alone
but to the
to
future
building
we'd been
something
working
with
toward
someone
all
who
along.
sees me clearly.
The journey
Hollister tightened
had been
his
nothing
embrace
like I'd
slightly,
expected.
understanding
There
the
had been
significance of her
detours and
words.
misunderstandings,
I meant
moments
what
of
I said
despair
in my
and
vows,
unexpected
Charlotte.
allies.
Your independence is
But
part of
sitting
what
here
I love
now,
about you.
I
That
wouldn't have
doesn't
changed
change
a
because
single
we're
step
married.
of the path
She
that had
turned
led
in
us
his
here.
arms to face him,
Not even the
reaching
moment
up
on
to
my
trace the
35th
bruise
birthday
on
when
his
I'd found
cheekbone, a
Daniel's
reminder
wedding
of
ring on the
day's
bathroom
earlier
sink
battle.
and feared the worst.
And I meant
Because
what I
sometimes words, I now
We
understood.
face
What
whatever
seems like an
comes
ending
together.
is actually just the
As they
beginning of a
returned to
different,
bed,
better story
Charlotte
than the one you
realized
thought
that the
you were living.
restlessness, that had
And our
driven
new
her
story
for so long.
was just beginning
the
to
need
unfold.
to keep
Was just
moving,
beginning to
to
unfold.
avoid
The
attachment,
morning of my
to
pregnancy
maintain
test
her
dawned crisp
disguise
and
at all
clear.
costs.
I woke before
had
the
finally
alarm,
quieted,
my body
not
humming with
because she
nervous
had
energy
surrendered her
despite
freedom,
having barely
but
slept.
because she had found someone
Beside
who
me, Daniel
expanded
stirred,
it rather
immediately
than
alert
constraining
as if he'd
it.
been hovering just below consciousness.
In the weeks that
all
followed,
night.
life in
Today's
Silver
the day,
Peak
he
settled
murmured,
into a new
reaching
rhythm.
for my hand.
Charlotte
Today's the
and
day,
Hollister
I
established
echoed,
routines
trying to keep
that
my
honored
voice
both
steady.
their professional
We had an
responsibilities
8 a.m.
and their
appointment at the
personal
fertility
connection.
clinic for the
She
blood test
continued
that would
training
determine
male
whether the
carriers
embryo
and
transfer had been
developing new
successful.
routes,
Dr.
occasionally
Chen
joining
had
the
promised
riders
results
herself
by late
when
afternoon,
particularly
which
difficult
meant
deliveries
hours of
required her
waiting,
expertise.
wondering,
He
and
maintained
trying not to
law
obsess
and
over
order
every
with
potential
the same
symptom.
principled approach as before,
The drive
but
to
with
the
a
clinic
new
passed in
lightness
comfortable
that the
silence,
townsfolk attributed
both of
to
us
married
lost in our own
happiness.
thoughts and fears.
Together, they created
Over the
something
past
unique,
2 years of
a
treatments,
partnership
we'd
that
been through
defied conventional
this exact
roles
scenario
while
twice
fulfilling
before.
the deepest purpose
Both
of
times
marriage.
had ended in
Two people
disappointment.
strengthening
Both
each
times
other,
we'd regrouped,
protecting each
adjusted the
other, and
approach,
building
and
something
tried again.
larger than either could achieve
But
alone.
this time felt different.
News eventually
Maybe it was
reached
the
them
increased
that
hormone
Sarah
levels
Hollister
Dr.
had been
Chen had been
apprehended
so
in
encouraged
California,
by.
attempting to
Maybe it was
establish
the
a
higher
new
quality of
criminal
the embryos.
enterprise using
Or
connections
maybe it was
from her
simply
brother's former
that the
operation.
journey to this
The
moment had
telegram
been
reporting
so
her
unexpected,
arrest and pending
from birthday
trial
crisis
brought
to
a sense
renewed
of closure.
commitment to potential
The final
twins,
thread of
that it
Blackwell's
seemed
legacy
fated to succeed.
finally severed.
The blood draw itself
Does it
took
bother you?
less than a minute.
Charlotte asked
As the
Hollister
nurse
as they
labeled my
discussed the
sample,
news over
she
dinner one
smiled
evening.
encouragingly.
Knowing she'll
Try
likely
to keep
spend
busy
years
today.
in prison,
Staring
he
at your
considered the
phone waiting
question
for results
seriously,
won't make them
as
come
he
any
did all
faster.
matters that touched on
Easier
justice
said than
and
done.
consequence.
Breakfast?
No,
Daniel suggested as we
finally.
left the clinic.
Sarah made her
That
choices,
diner
just
you
as her
like
brother
is
did,
just around the corner.
just as Williams and
Normally,
his men
the
did.
thought of their
The
blueberry
law
pancakes
applies
would have
to
been tempting.
everyone,
But my stomach
regardless
was in
of
knots.
personal connections.
Actually,
Charlotte
I
nodded,
think I want to go to the lake
understanding his
house.
perspective,
Daniel
but
raised
also
an eyebrow.
recognizing the complex
Really?
emotions that must
That's
lie
a
beneath
2-hour
it. And
drive.
us?
I
What
know,
choices
but
do we make
it
now
feels
that this
right.
chapter is finally
That's where
closed?
everything changed
A
on my
smile
birthday,
spread across
where we found
Hollister's
out about the
face,
fertility
warming
treatment
his typically
working.
serious expression.
It seems fitting to be there
Any
when we get the
choices
results.
we want, Charlotte.
He smiled,
That's the beauty of where we
understanding
find
without
ourselves.
needing further explanation.
He reached
The
across
lake
the
house it
table,
is.
taking her hand.
We stopped
The
at home
future
to
is
pack
ours to
overnight
write.
bags,
As
both
summer
of us
bloomed
moving
across
with
the
purpose,
Colorado territory,
grateful for something
Charlotte
concrete to do.
embraced that future
As
with the
Daniel
same
loaded the car,
courage
my
and
phone rang.
determination
Olivia,
that had carried her through
how are you holding
years
up?
of solitary
She asked
survival.
without preamble.
Only
Nervous,
now,
hopeful,
she no longer
terrified,
fought alone.
I admitted.
Now,
We just did the
she
blood
built,
test.
rather
And
than
now, the
simply
longest wait of
endured.
your life begins.
Now, she lived fully
She knew
as
the
herself.
process well after
Charlotte
supporting me
Hollister,
through previous
formerly
attempts.
known as the mail carrier
Actually,
who
we're
delivered
heading to the
through
lake
dangerous
house to wait for the
territory,
results.
now known simply
It
as a
seemed
woman who had found her
symbolic
true
somehow.
destination.
That's perfect, Olivia agreed.
One crisp autumn
Full circle
morning,
moment.
nearly 6 months after
paused.
their wedding,
Want
Charlotte rode
company?
Scout up to the high ridge
I could
overlooking
drive up
Silver
later.
Peak.
Be there when you
The
get the
town
call.
had grown steadily.
I considered
New
her
buildings
offer,
rising to
touched by
accommodate
her
increasing
willingness to drop
population and
everything to
prosperity.
support us.
From this vantage point,
Thanks,
she could see
but
the
I
mail
think
office
Daniel
she
and
had
I need this
established,
time together.
the marshal's headquarters
Whatever the
where
results,
Hollister worked,
we should
and
process
the house they shared
them
at the edge
privately
of town.
first. I
3
understand
physical
completely.
anchors of the
But
life
I'm just
they
a
had
phone
built
call
together.
away if you need me.
But it was.
I know.
The wilderness
And live.
stretching beyond the settlement.
Thank you for
that
everything.
Still called to her
Not just
occasionally.
today,
The
but
vast,
throughout this whole
untamed
journey.
spaces
That's
that
what
had
best
shaped
friends
her
are
into
for,
the woman she had
she said
become.
simply.
She would always
As we
need
drove
these
north toward
moments
the
of
lake,
solitude.
I felt my
These
anxiety
opportunities to feel the
gradually
unique
easing.
freedom of riding
There was something
alone
almost
under an
meditative
endless
about
sky.
watching the cityscape give
The
way to
difference now
suburbs
was
and then to
that she
countryside,
never felt the need to
as if
hide
we were
who
physically
she was,
distancing ourselves
either
from
in
the stress of
town
waiting.
or in the wild.
What are you thinking
And
about?
Day's
Daniel
end,
asked,
she
glancing
would
over at
return
me.
to a home where
How
she was
much has
seen and
changed
valued
since we were
completely.
last here?
Her strength
It's only
and
been a few
independence
weeks, but it
cherished
feels like
rather
longer.
than feared.
He nodded.
Ready to head back?
Your birthday
came
seems
Hollister's
like a
voice
lifetime
as he guided
ago.
his horse up beside hers.
A lifetime
He
ago,
had
I
learned
thought,
to give her the space
you were
she
leaving
needed,
me, I
but
mused.
also to join
Now
her
we
when
might
the
be
moment
having
was
twins.
right. Another
Let's not get ahead
balance
of
they had
ourselves,
perfected
he
together.
cautioned gently. though I
Charlotte
could
looked
hear
at
the
him,
undercurrent
then
of
back at the
excitement in his
panorama
voice.
before them. The town
We arrived
and
at the lake house
wilderness,
shortly after noon.
civilization and
Unlike my
freedom,
previous frantic visit on
partnership
my
and
birthday,
independence.
this time I noticed
all the
the
apparent
subtle
contradictions
signs
that
of
she had
early
somehow,
autumn, gold-tinged
against all
leaves
odds,
on the maple
managed to
trees,
reconcile.
the slightly cooler breeze off the
Yes,
water,
she said,
monarch
gathering
butterflies
Scout's
pausing on their
reins.
migration south.
I'm ready.
Inside, The cabin
As they
welcomed
rode
us with
side by
familiar
side down
comfort.
the mountain trail,
Daniel built a
Charlotte
small fire
reflected
while I
that
prepared
perhaps
lunch,
this was the
both of us
greatest
finding
delivery she
solace
had
in
ever
routine
made,
tasks.
carrying herself
We ate on the
through
deck,
all the dangerous
watching the lake
territories of
sparkle
fear
in the
and
afternoon
disguise
sun,
and isolation,
deliberately avoiding
to arrive
conversation
finally
about
at
what
the
the
truth
test
of who
results
she was
might
meant
reveal.
to be. Not Charlie
Remember
Morgan,
when we bought this
not
place?
the Prairie Shadow,
Daniel asked,
not even
gazing
simply
out over
Charlotte
the water.
Hollister, but herself,
3 years ago this
complete,
month, I nodded.
uncompromised,
Everyone
and
thought we were
finally,
crazy
perfectly
spending that
free.
much on a second property. Best
Up
decision
next,
we ever made.
You've got two more
We spent the
standout
afternoon
stories
walking
right
the
on
lake
your
shore,
screen.
skipping
If this
stones
one hit
across
the
the
mark,
calm water,
you won't want to
and
pass these up.
steadfastly not
Just
checking
click
our
and check
phones
them
every
out.
5 minutes.
And don't forget to subscribe and
By
turn
4
on the
o'clock,
notification
however,
bell
the
so you
pretense of
don't miss
distraction
any
had grown
upload from
thin.
us.
Distraction had grown thin.